Good evening, and welcome to this special meeting of the Brockton City Council for December 20th, 2023. A quorum being present, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Item number 1, call of the meeting.
Accepted and placed on file.
Item number 2, officer's return of notice.
Accepted and placed on file.
For communications, item number 3, from the mayor, in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council authorizes the transfer of $9,947,925 from the Chapter 324 Supplemental Reserve, $7,947,925, appropriate from certified free cash, $2 million, upon certification from the Department of Revenue, to the fiscal year 2024 budget, for a total of $9,947,925. This transfer will serve to balance the appropriation, assistance satisfying the FY23 Brockton Public School deficit, and also reduce the tax levy for FY24.
Accepted and placed on file.
Communication from the CFO relative to the same.
Accepted and placed on file.
For orders, item number 5, ordered that the following name sum be and the same is hereby transferred and appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $9,947,925. Transfer from the Chapter 324 Supplemental Reserve, $7,947,925. Appropriate from certified free cash, $2 million, upon certification from the Department of Revenue, to fiscal year 2024 budget, $9,947,925. This transfer will serve to balance the appropriation, assistance satisfying the FY23 Brockton Public School deficit, and also reduce the tax levy for FY24.
Councilor Mendez.
Motion to waive the rules and act on it this evening.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to suspend the rules and act on this matter this evening. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. It carries. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council. I want to first of all thank you all for, number one, accommodating us. I want to thank the council president and the city clerk, Tim Cruz. I served with many of you for 14 years. I would be a little put off right now as a city councilor with the last week to go to legislation session. You just met here on Monday night. Next week you'll have caucus. So I can tell you that I'm very appreciative of all of you being here, all 11 of you. It means a lot as a mayor, as a public servant. So truly thank you. I know a lot of you changed a lot of things to do tonight, probably missed some holiday parties with your family to be here. So I just want to say thank you. I also want to answer a couple of questions right off the bat. Why are we here tonight? Why was there a need for a special meeting? Last Friday, I was on vacation with my family last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in Washington, D.C. I want to thank the council president who served as the acting mayor. Last Friday, I was notified, I actually had to leave the Smithsonian Museum because the CFO had indicated that he had a conversation with the Department of Revenue, DOR, requiring a legislative vote. A city council vote was a necessity in order for us to move forward. I reached out immediately at noon via text to the acting mayor, to Attorney Resnick, to Attorney Solicitor Bridges, City Clerk, and to Mr. Clarkson, saying we need to work together on this. I mean, we're short order to get this done. I want to also just thank a few folks other than yourselves. I want to thank the city team. I want to thank Troy Clarkson and all the members that are here today because they have been working hours and hours and hours since this school deficit FY23 came to light. Irene is the acting auditor, but when Karen went out, Irene stepped up, and she has been working with DOR on a regular basis. A DOR, Department of Revenue, I mean, there's only 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth, but DOR is working with the city of Brockton as a high priority. I want to thank Sean Cronin and I want to thank Deb Wagner for working with us. But at the end of the day, why we're here is we have to take corrective actions. there is a deficit that is hampering the efforts, not just on the school side, but on the city side of Brockton. It's a deficit that needs to be cleared up. Now, some people would say, why do we need to clear it up now? And these folks are going to be able to explain a lot better than I can. But we have to get out tax bills by the end of the calendar year, December 31st. DOR has to certify, and that's why they are looking for this deficit to be cleared up by a legislative vote. They have to certify our tax rate. They have to do that and give us enough time to get our mailings out to the residents that we represent. Now, with Christmas being Monday, it's not ideal, but if we can get the bills out to Kelly and Ryan, who's our billing consultant, on Tuesday, it's pretty clear and evident and hopeful, and I'll cross my fingers that we'll be able to meet that deadline. If we don't meet that deadline, there's a couple different things. Number one, we would have to send out a third quarter estimate tax bill. Now, you know in Brockton, first quarter, second quarter estimates, but third and fourth are actuals. So if we had to send out an estimate, it would have a detrimental impact on the residents and the business owners because the May bill, the fourth quarter, would be an actual, but it would have to also catch up the variant from an estimate versus an actual. Now, what's before you tonight is an order, and it's a sizable order. It's almost $10 million, right? It's 9.947925. Now, you might say, well, what's the mayor talking about? That's short of what the deficit is. The deficit is consisting of two matters, right? About 14.4, which is the general fund expenditures that were spent in excess. And you know you cannot deficit spend, only snow and ice. But there's also an out-of-district of 3.9. You add those two together, and you're at $18,253,853.95. Mr. Clarkson is going to be able to explain it to you tonight, but by raising the city's estimated local receipts, that's going to be able to make the variant catch up. That 9.9 that I humbly support and ask you to support tonight, plus raising that, which was recommended by Department of Revenue. I also just want to let you know a couple other things. The order that we drafted, because time was of the essence, at that time on Monday, we did not have free cash certified. As of yesterday, and you know because you got a plethora of documents from the CFO, free cash was certified by Department of Revenue, and it's in the amount of almost $4.2 million. You're going to also see these SRAs, these special revenue accounts. Troy's going to be really better explaining it than I am. But they are, some of those are deemed as deficits, but that's a little bit of a misnomer. Some of those are waiting for reimbursements, such as the lead paint for the BRA, which was about $1.2 million, but that came in yesterday as well. I also know that some of you were going to ask me tonight, because I've spoken to all of you, about, Bob, what's going on with the investigation? And I can look all of you in the eye and say, I'm not running it at all. It wouldn't be proper for me. I wear two hats. I'm the mayor of the city of Brockton as the CEO. I also chair the school committee. The role is that of the solicitor, Megan Bridges. We're following all the proper procedures. I have been fully cooperative. I will continue to be fully cooperative. I have asked, humbly asked, not instructed, but humbly asked all department heads and all city employees to work with the investigators. We truly need to find out what happened, how it happened, how we take constructive action so it never happens again. Now, I also want to let you know that the school has also authorized an audit, and the audit firm is RSM US LLP. It's an international accounting firm. A lot of you probably don't know this, but it's based in Charlestown, Massachusetts. They are being engaged right now on the school side with attorney Sarah Spotterford, who's the outside legal counsel. So I know there are some questions. I also am going to humbly ask that we need the investigation to play out. I'm suspecting that some of you, if not all of you, will also be talked to by the lawyers that are working on that. But at the end of the day, we're here tonight to try to solve collectively a deficit for FY23, which is hampering not just the schools, but it's really hampering the city of Brockton as well. And I mean that in the utmost respect, but Troy Clarkson and his team are working with quite a few disadvantages on the school side. There is not a CFO on that school side, as you know. He is out on he's on administrative leave, and the acting CFO, business agent, is also on administrative leave. You know, we are going to continue to work for the best interest of the residents of the city of Brockton, but I am humbly asking you tonight, and again, I know it's not ideal, but we have been giving a little bit of a gloom and doom proposition by looking at other cities that did not have the financial means to bail out. And that's what this is. I want to be very blunt. This is the city bailing out a deficit on the school side. So Troy is here. He can answer any and all questions. I'm here to answer any and all questions. If you have any questions for any of these esteemed people, John O'Donnell was under the weather tonight, but I want to thank Julie Castor. She joined us tonight from the assessor's office as well. So, Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clarkson, any opening remarks?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam President and members of the council. Just to add a few thoughts to what the mayor shared. I understand this is an historic and solemn night for all of us, and it's not something we want to be here doing at any time, never mind a few days before a holiday. But I believe that the fiscal solvency and stability of the city is at stake, and that's why we're here. The mayor's correct. We're here to ask you to correct a very unfortunate situation. But we're also here because of the financial policies that you, as the City Council, and the Mayor put in place. And what I mean that in a positive way. We're here because we have sufficient reserves, and we have conducted the city's fiscal operation in a way that we are able to address this deficit. So although the situation we're being asked to correct is problematic and frustrating, I think it's important that we collectively and the public understand that the reason why we're able to ask you to fix this problem tonight is because of the conservative fiscal approach the city has taken for the last several years that allows us to have some of the funds that I'll talk about in just a minute. Our approach under the leadership of the mayor, and certainly in the 5 years that I've been here as your CFO, is complete transparency. And although it sort of got lost in the discussion about tonight, it's important that we tell you that this week, for the 4th year in a row, the city was awarded the Distinguished Budget Award by the Government Finance Officers Association. And I mention that just to underscore the commitment that we've made over the last several years to being transparent. One of the challenges we faced in the last several months is when I was asked to get involved and to work with the superintendent and the staff over at the schools, what we found was not transparent, and it's been very difficult to understand, to realize, to quantify the scope and level of the deficit. I want to echo the mayor's gratitude toward the Department of Revenue. They have been full partners. The first call we made back several months ago when this came to light was to our external auditor. The next call we made was to the Department of Revenue, and they have been full partners and helpful since the first day. The reason why we're here at the final hour is because it has taken us these months to actually understand, fully understand, and quantify the scope of the issues we needed to address. So very briefly, I just wanted to go over the list of documents that I've provided you in the last couple of days. As the mayor mentioned, the Department of Revenue acted very swiftly when they got the information from us and put together the free cash calculation. That's a very detailed account that we provided to you. We also provided you the entirety of the city's balance sheet, which is also a publication of the Department of Revenue, but is based on the information we provide. We provided you with a Munis report, and for those watching at home, Munis is the accounting software that's used by both the city and the schools. And so to underscore, validate the number of the school general fund deficit, we've provided you with that Munis report to back that up. And we've also provided you with a list of funds that have been deducted from our free cash. Let me just speak to that very briefly. Many of you have had the opportunity to discuss this in detail with the mayor and me over the last couple of days. But what we're being asked to do tonight is to address the general fund expenditure deficit that the schools incurred. That's that $14.4 million. In addition, we're being asked to cure a deficit in their out-of-district tuition expenditure of approximately $3.9 million. So as I noted to you in the email on Monday, the total of that is $18,253,853.95. You will notice in the free cash calculation there are other funds that appear to be in deficit, but we are not asking you tonight to cure those deficits. The reason for that is the free cash calculation is a snapshot in time. Many of those numbers that you see in arrears, both for the schools and the city, exist that way because they are, for instance, funds from grants where the money has been approved for the city has expended some funds, but the reimbursement has not yet been received. So when the state calculates that free cash number, those numbers where those reimbursements have not been received are deducted from free cash, but they are not an overspending of the appropriation. And that's the difference between the numbers that you see in the free cash calculation and what we're being asked to address tonight. Again, that 14.4 and the 3.9 are actual expenditures above what was authorized. So the Department of Revenue correctly is saying to us, you overexpended in those areas in order for your tax rate to be set and for us to actually balance out your year. You need revenues to meet those over expenditures. The source of those funds are three different sources. One is, as noted in the order, we have accumulated that $7.9 million in that Chapter 324 reserve fund. That fund was created expressly for an eventuality like this. So I think it's both an appropriate and frankly necessary transfer. Because free cash was certified, we're able to then appropriate that money for any municipal purpose. So that gets us to just over almost $10 million. The rest of the money, just over $9 million, in fact, $9,067,000, we're not having to ask you to raise that money tonight because of the conservative fiscal policies I talked to you about a couple minutes ago. With the encouragement and the support of the Department of Revenue, we're raising our revenue estimates for this current fiscal year by that $9 million. What that means is that our revenues were estimated so conservatively that we're able to raise those revenues by $9 million and still have our revenue estimates less than the actual revenue receipts from last year. So that additional $9 million is responsible, it's realistic, and again, it is supported by the DOR. So that's why we're only asking you to raise roughly half of the deficit number. And I can go into detail, if you'd like, about which of those local receipts we're proposing to raise, but it's the result of our approach over the last several years in calculating those revenues. So I understand, again, and share your frustration that we have to be here tonight to do this, but I do believe that it's an important step to addressing the school deficit and moving on to allow us to then address the school spending in fiscal year 24 and work with them to create a budget that's fiscally responsible and transparent for fiscal year 25. So I guess that's it for an opening statement, and of course, along with the mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Farwell.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to say to Mr. Clarkson, thank you for being available, and after hours, people don't realize after 5 o'clock means nothing to us. You and I go back and forth and exchange information. I want to just provide a summary of where we are, because there may be people tuning in tonight that have basically no idea what we're doing. So, and these are the first documents that the council received relative to this issue, unless I'm mistaken, that just came out. From what's been reported in the press, on August 8th, and I remember that day because it's my birthday, that's when we found out that there was a deficit in the FY23 school budget. And the figure that was provided was, I think, 14.4 million. We're now here tonight, and it is a larger figure, the 18+ million, because you've added in, I think, out-of-district placements for special ed. But you and I spoke today, and it's important that the public knows everything now. It all comes out, warts and all, good and bad. There's actually another $2 million that we're talking about. So in round figures, we're talking about a $20 million overspending by the school department for FY23. Is that an accurate statement?
As we discussed, Councilor, it is, and I want, and I will be, nothing but forthright with you, as I always am. And Councilor Farwell and I discussed that at some length. The challenge in answering a question like that definitively is twofold. One, when we take those deductions from the free cash, the common word used to describe those is deficit. So I could most certainly answer that question in the affirmative and say yes. However, there are, and you'll see, I hope have reviewed that and see that there are other deductions. As the mayor mentioned, the Brockton Redevelopment Authority has federal grants, and there are deductions from the free cash in total around $2 million because of the sequence of applying for the reimbursements and receiving them. So for purposes of the free cash, that's a deficit as well. But we have a revenue source to be able to replenish those deductions from free cash. And so I believe that is why some of these other revenue funds for the schools show that they're in a deficit. So yes, absolutely, that number is accurate, but we're not being asked to raise and appropriate money to cover those because there are revenue sources in those revolving funds to replenish those numbers.
Okay, and I don't want to turn this tonight into a courtroom type of situation, but the school department is given a specific amount of money to spend for FY23. They overspent what was provided to them by the mayor and by vote of this council.
Most certainly,
What I'm
yes.
looking for is not that there might be a revolving fund, not that there might be revenues that are going to come in, not that we have sufficient revenues because of free cash to cover this. What is the amount of money that was spent without authorization? And is it approximately, I don't want you to have to calculate it tonight, is it approximately $20 million?
So to answer the question the way you phrased it, I would say it's $18,253,853. But I absolutely recognize there are, so the rest of those expenses, those deductions from free cash are actually common for schools, for cities, that if you look up the free cash calculation for other municipalities, you won't see numbers this big, for sure.
I understand that.
But there's always those deductions.
And only because of time, and I know other people have questions. The fact of the matter is that when you raid, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, when you use free cash, you're taking away the flexibility you have for future years.
100%
Because we
agree.
use free
Yes.
cash oftentimes remaining to balance the FY25 budget. So there really isn't that much positive about having to use this free cash to address what was done on the school department side. There really isn't anything that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy.
Oh, I agree, and if I didn't intend to convey that, I did want to highlight the fact, though, that the consequence if we didn't have this money would be deficit emergency borrowing from the state and a state takeover. So I didn't mean in any way to convey that this is positive. I'm as frustrated and furious as you are.
All right, now, when did you start working on these documents and getting these figures together? Because we all know the deadline for sending out the tax bills. And I know that many of us, and my colleague here put it the way I guess a former cop would, you feel like you've got a gun to your head because all of a sudden, 5 days before Christmas, we're here and we've got to act because supposedly the DOR says they're going to drop some type of a hammer. So when did we start working on this and finalize these figures? And knowing that deadline, and I know you know it well because you've worked in other municipalities, how did we get to this point that it has to be at the 11th hour?
That's an excellent question. And we started working on this literally months ago. The challenge for us has been to quantify and understand the scope of the problem with the schools, and that the information that was available made it very difficult for us to be able to get to a point where we could finalize the city's documents. Let me give you, for instance, that budget that I spoke about a few minutes ago. If you go online and you can look at the 400 pages of that budget, and then if you said to me on any given night, how much have we spent on a particular line? Our acting budget director, Evan Lacasse, could go on to his computer and a program, spreadsheet that he's created that's fed from Munis and give you a day-by-day accurate update of where we're at. That sort of record keeping and accuracy currently does not exist with the Brockton Public Schools. So we've had to literally go in with the assistance of the consultant that was provided by DESE and build that up from the ground up. And in an operation as large as the Brockton Public Schools, some $300 million a year, it's not as simple as just pushing a button and printing out where the money is. And so it's been painstaking over several months to try to develop the information where it was accurate and complete enough that we felt comfortable moving forward. So, we believed that we may be able to just solve the problem by reducing free cash by the amount of the deficit. But as we discovered more and more information, it became apparent that that was not possible. This is not uncharted territory, but it's rarefied territory in that we're not the first city to have a problem with the school deficit, but generally when that happens, they don't have the money to cover it, and so you have emergency financing and then the state takes over. Because this was an instance where we thought we could cure it internally, it did require a lot of work with the DOR, and as I've said a couple of times, they've been very helpful, but we would have constant meetings with them and really try to brainstorm about how best to address this. And so I think it was a combination of the complexity and the lack of information available to us, and the fact that this process was something that was not often executed, and so we really had to work closely with the DOR to come up with a solution. And so
And the approximate date was, going back to my original question, what was the approximate date when you reached the conclusion that we were going to have a $9.9 million transfer?
that was Friday, Last Friday.
Just
immediately.
last Friday.
Absolutely, and I reached out to the mayor who was on vacation, and he reached out immediately to the council president. And so I know the timing is terrible, but...
And you feel you both stand by these figures?
I can tell you something that, reading through this that is troubling is that there's a deficit on CARES Act. And as we all recall, CARES Act was administered by Plymouth County. So the DOR is not looking for, at this year, looking for reimbursement on CARES Act, but the schools submitted things that were not accepted by CARES Act. And we have to figure out, not now, but at some point down the line, probably by 26, how CARES Act is going to be rectified. So I'm a little concerned about that. I'll be honest with you. I'm also concerned about FY25.
All right, so if you've reached this point and you've submitted this to us and you've done all this work and you have all of these good people who work in government that have helped put this together, why are we spending money for a school committee audit? You've got the city doing an audit and a forensic investigation. You've now reached a point where you've, if I'm to accept these documents, solved half the problem of school department overspending. And I'll be honest with you, and I know people cringe because I come out with what I feel. To the average resident, it looks like a dog and pony show that the school committee, and I know some of them are here, and I'll face you and tell you, it looks like you're auditing yourself because you have a real problem, and somehow this is going to ameliorate the impact of that problem. Why waste the money and the time? You've done half the work at least, and maybe all of the work if the $18.4 million is accurate. So why are we hiring that firm and stretching this out to a future date? I don't get it.
I mean, I could say, as chair of the school committee, 7 members are elected in that capacity, as we're all duly elected and we'll be sworn in here a week from Monday. The will of the school committee, those elected members, was to have an audit authorized, and there was an audit selection committee with 3 community members. I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the other 7. I do want to recognize, I didn't see Mr. Sullivan here. Hi, Judy. Council, with all due respect to you, they wanted to go in that direction. Now, we are spending money. It's going to be up to $99,000. It's a sizable amount of money. I can't speak for the 7 members. I can tell you that I came before you when this came to light, and I told you that as the mayor, not as the chair of the school committee, as the mayor, I need an investigation done ASAP, run through Megan Bridges as a solicitor. So I can't answer the question, Winthrop. I can't.
I understand, Mr. Mayor. You can't reach into the minds of the other school committee members. Mr. Clarkson, when you first got involved in the schools, you found out that a number of people had the ability to override the system and deficit spend. If you know, were the people in charge of financial issues, and I'm not talking about Mr. Petronio or the other gentleman, forgive me, I forgot his name, were they given formal training? Do you know if people placed in that position of trust and responsibility, did they have the requisite training to know what they were doing and to at least know that you can't continually deficit spend because you may not have the revenues to satisfy the spending?
I don't know for sure, but I do not believe so.
And do you know if the school department and school committee has, and I asked you this earlier, and so it's not a surprise, has any remediation been ordered for people so that they now know, wait a minute, we have a serious problem here, and we're going to get you the training that you need so that you'll know exactly what's required and how to do it and how to work collectively with the CFO and the city auditor?
Again, I can't say that with certainty, but I do not believe so. What I can tell you, though, in terms of remediation, that access and that, and what Councilor Farwell is referring to, Munis itself has an ability, if you want to spend above an appropriation, Munis will allow that. The software allows for that, but it has to be, that override capability has to be specifically granted by someone with permissions to do so. So when we discovered that multiple folks over at the school department had that override capability, soon after I began working with them, we shut that off. And the only people in the city, I believe, right now that have that override capability are the auditor and the budget director. Not even I have that capability, because it's important to us that it be strictly controlled. And now overrides are possible. Let me give you a quick for instance, because I want to be sensitive of the time tonight. But if you have a grant fund where the grant money is coming in but hasn't yet been received, and you have an expense related to that grant, you can spend without the actual cash in the account lawfully. But that requires an override in munis. And so now, if anyone wants to spend in that fashion, it's documented in an email. It comes over to my office. Written permission is provided, and then and only then is that override granted. And so that's, I think, that is a remedial step. But I agree with you that one of our goals long-term is to really provide professional development and education for all of the finance employees so that they understand those rules.
And by the way, the reason for these questions is I don't want this to be a Band-Aid approach. This can never happen again.
Agreed.
This is a textbook case in terrible school governance and school financial management. I mean, it's embarrassing. I'll start my 23rd year in elective office on January 1st here in the city. I never thought I'd see this happen again. In the age of computers and redundancy and checking and cross-checking, why is the Department of Revenue, if you know, so insistent that we handle this $9.947 million, but apparently, okay, Brockton, you're going to be able to adjust your figures and cover the other $9 million. I don't understand the urgency of their request that we absolutely act now or else.
That's an excellent question, and it gets to the heart of why we're here tonight. The reason for that is, and their request is actually for the $18.2 million, and it's because that 14.4 and the 3.9 represent an overexpense of a budgeted amount. The other numbers, as we discussed before, similar to other grant programs or revolving accounts, are not an expenditure in excess of an appropriation. And so the DOR is requiring, what that extra $18 million in spending does is it essentially, it brings our spending above the total appropriation that was made by this body. And so the others do not, because those are funds that are replenished. But because the overall expense for the city government was beyond what you, as the only folks that can appropriate money, because that spending was above what you appropriated, the DOR is saying, look, before you close things out, you need to fix that. And so that's what the distinction is between that $18 million and the rest of the funds that appear in the free cash certification.
But in summary, we will be using $18 million from various reserves, including free cash.
100%. Well, we'll be using $9 million in reserves. We'll be using the extra $9 million in additional revenues that we're projecting. But let's be clear about something, and the mayor touched on this, and Council, you did as well. The effect of that, by raising those estimates, that means the following year's free cash will be significantly reduced because we won't be exceeding our projections by those large amounts. And so this is absolutely sort of spending future reserves to cure the deficit. We will be able to, when we come before you in a few months to approve the FY25 budget, we will be able to use those increased revenue estimates to support the FY25 budget. So that extra $9 or $10 million in revenue projections is real money and real dollars that will be available for spending on the FY25 budget. But we typically use, this year we used $19 million in free cash to balance the budget. So FY25, as the mayor mentioned, is still going to be a challenge as a direct result of this issue.
One point of information that all of us in this room have to be aware of, that if you approve this tonight and we close out that 324 stabilization, there is a mandate to replenish it. So that's another thing that we all have to be aware of. So if you take 7, 8, 7, 9 out of that, Marty Brophy's explained to me there's a percentage that we have to replenish back. It might not be the full 7.9, but we as a municipality have an obligation to replenish that stabilization.
Mr. Mayor, the ripple effect of what happened with the schools in FY23, I don't think we've seen the end of it yet. And I'm going to tell you what really bothers me. And I'm not defending Mr. Petronio, and I don't know anything of what he did or his involvement or anything else, but that man was in a public meeting, I think it was either in April or May of 2023, and he cautioned the school committee that they were about $1 million in deficit, I believe, in the transportation fund. Not one person said, well, wait a minute, we better do an audit and find out where we are with all of our various accounts, because if you've got $1 million deficit here, we could have $1 million deficit in other areas. That was never done. And it's like everyone went on autopilot and said, oh, Aldo, okay, you know, I'm sure you'll take care of it, everything will be fine. And that's what incenses me, because the warning signs were there, and they weren't acted upon. And I guess my last couple of questions are, when you sit, and Mr. Clarkson, you might know this, when you sit in the accounts payable office at the school department, and you keep entering bills that have to be paid, is there no bell that goes off that, wait a minute, we don't have these revenues? Because apparently everyone is still working there. And that's what I don't get. I do not see the sense of urgency on the school side in reaction to what has happened. And as a matter of fact, if anything, I've seen obfuscation and outright disdain for us. I sent an email to the superintendent asking for information. I don't even get it. So where is there an urgency over there that we've got to get this under control and never let it happen again, or are we just in the infant steps getting to where we need to be?
I think we're in the infant steps of getting to where we need to be. Certainly, we have brought, I believe, a commitment to best practices that prevent the kind of spending that you just described. Because, as I mentioned a few moments ago, the way the system was set up at the schools, people that were entering bills had the ability, if there is a, and I don't work with Munis in that fashion, so I don't know what the warning is, but there is a warning that tells you that you can't spend because there's not enough money in that budget line. But because folks had the ability to override that, I don't think that sense of urgency existed or exists, because the construct in which people were working, the culture was such that that was not a concern. It's very different over here. And department heads will tell you that, you know, if they're going to exceed a budget amount for one reason or another, they either have to come here for a transfer, and you see that, or money has to be moved around. And so we are bringing that philosophy and that mindset to the schools. We now have a form that documents if money needs to be moved within statutory categories even. No money can be moved without a signature from Dr. Cobbs and me. That process was designed specifically not only to provide accountability and documentation, but to change the mindset so that folks understood that that's how normal budgeting works.
All right, I'm going to close by a personal comment, because as you know, I was on the school committee for 10 years, actually 4 more years as mayor. I can't think of anything else in any community more important than making sure that kids get the best education they can, that they are in a safe and constructive learning environment, and that the staff is safe and wants to come to work. We don't have that. And I'm telling you, gentlemen, and Mr. Mayor, I know you're the chair of the school committee, there is an awful lot of work ahead of us beyond just this. And I hope it's done.
It needs to be done.
It needs to be done. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is, because we're asking questions here tonight, I know I'm the first questioner. I don't expect a lot of happy you-know-what from committee members on your school committee that resent us having any oversight or any discussion or anything else. We're bailing them out tonight. Not for anything we did, for what was allowed to happen over there. So, and I think that's our role, and I'm happy to carry it out, but I don't expect a lot of banter back and forth that, you know, who the hell are we? Unfortunately, we're placed in this position, and I know we'll do the right thing. And I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Councilor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Madam President. To say this is a dumpster fire would be the understatement of the year. I just, one of the things that I feel we need to make sure happens, and Mr. Clarkson or the mayor, one of you, obviously there were not proper controls in place. I think we all accept that this shouldn't have been possible. We talked about it in a little bit in October. Mr. Clarkson and I had asked you about those controls and your role in the authority that the special act that created your position gives you. And so I think what I'd like to hear more about is what are you going to be able to do, because we can't go back to the way it was. We can't go back to they have their own CFO, everything. All right, this is over. We just go back to the way we were doing business. So your involvement, I think, has been very important since August, and I think that significant involvement and oversight from this building has to remain long-term on the school department. No other city department gets to do their own thing, and I know that school departments around the state and a lot of communities have a lot of independence, I guess you could say, but this is one of those situations where after something like this happens, we can't go back to doing business that way. How could we ever look our constituents in the face and say that was okay? So what is going to long-term be in place, the folks in this building making sure that this never happens? And I mean, obviously not just that department, any department, but we're talking about the school deficit, that the oversight is there, that they can't do this again.
So one thing I can opine on is change is needed. Change needs to happen. It will happen. It'll happen with me as mayor and whoever's the next mayor and whoever the next city councils are. And, you know, I said the word bailout, and the councilor echoed that. This is exactly what that is. One thing that I'm going to do, and again, not to spend money, but I think a new position here at City Hall in the auditor's office, an auditor at City Hall dedicated 100% to the school side. It doesn't exist. It's very similar to what we did last budget year with the two grant writers, right, focused here on a specific purpose. Now, Troy in his capacity can talk to you about what his plans are, but we have to come up with tangible measures. We have to make sure that we safeguard the money. So when I put my name on it and you ratify that budget, money can't be spent in excess of that unless it's snow and ice. It's simple as that. It's unlawful to spend over that. So, of course, the CFO can tell you my thoughts, but, you know, we have to be able to, and again, control spending here, which we do a very decent job, a very good job, but it has to go across the street as well, but it has to be based out of this location, in my opinion.
I agree with you. That's literally what I'm pushing to get to here.
So I know that some of you have talked about what legislative solutions there might be to answer that question, and I think those deserve some discussion. I mean, I can tell you other communities where I've worked have combined operations between the municipality and the schools. I've seen it done for finance, for facilities, for human resources, and I think those opportunities are available to the city through the work that you will do. And I think that's something we should strongly consider. Absolutely, I think that continued oversight is critical. I think the position the mayor mentioned is something he and I have talked about. It's something I've talked about with some of the folks at the schools, as well as the several of the consultants involved. And the way that would work is we could, I think we should, create a position that's some sort of auditing and oversight of the schools. It would be a city position, but paid for by the schools, similar to how we spend money in the city budget for school employee health insurance, but then when we do the report at the end of the year to show the total effort by the city to support public education, those expenses, even though they're not part of the school budget, we get a credit for that money. And that's, I think, having that independence of a city position overseeing the schools is critical. Maybe it's more than one. I think a restructuring of the school finance operation itself is critical, and so that there are clearly defined roles and responsibilities, clearly defined reporting structures, and also clearly defined policies and procedures that govern how different departments, not just finance, but how different departments talk to one another. So that, for instance, when a new position is created, there's collaboration and communication between human resources, finance, and payroll, so that a position, when it's created or filled, there's clear documentation about what that person's going to make and where the money's coming from. That kind of coordination was not occurring until we stepped in. Now, no position is filled, again, without a position control form that is signed both by Dr. Cobbs and by me. And I know that has created a lot of frustration. But the fact of the matter is, there were positions that were funded last year, but the funding was not supported by an appropriation. So we had to take that step to ensure that that any positions that were funded this year actually had money behind them. So I think that the long-term answer to those questions, Councillor, is, as the mayor suggested, multi-year solutions. The organization, I think, needs to be rebuilt from the bottom up so that there is not only a culture of accountability, but a structure of accountability.
Right.
Just also, Councilor, I think that the budget process itself needs to be 100% revamped, and I've spoken to many of you. Typically, it's just an agenda item on the budget, right? And the superintendent comes, and it's relatively pretty quick. I think it should be a dedicated night, and many of you have spoken to me about that, where we can have not just superintendent, we can have principals here. It needs to be broken down. What's the Kennedy Elementary School? What's the Brookfield Elementary School? What's West Middle School? What's North? And that, it's kind of like what we do here on the department side, right? Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't happen. And both you and Tom served there, right?
Right.
And Councilor did. So there has to be a revamping on the budget process itself as well, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you, and things like the position control you just described are exactly what I'm looking for. And tell me if you disagree, but I think there's room for more controls like that, because
Absolutely.
That's one area where there was overspending, but there's other areas where there's room for that level of control coming from this building. And I guess that's sort of what I'm looking for, is a commitment that there will be more oversight, more control retained in this building, once this is all, we figure out the CARES, which I'll get to, and FY25, and once this is all figured out, and the investigations and audits are done, and all of this is over, fully over, which I think we all know that's not tonight. The controls have to stay in this building, you know. I just don't think we could, after going through this, okay, well, let us know if you need anything, folks. We can't do that. So I guess that's what I was looking for with that question, is to make sure that, that position control that you just described is just the beginning of the level of oversight and control that will come from this building with school department finances going forward. Are you able to, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but basically commit that that's going to be the long-term plan?
I'm happy to answer that with an emphatic yes.
Thank you.
And it is occurring, and I think that's a good opportunity to recognize some of the people that are here tonight that are exercising that oversight and control right now, that work here with us at City Hall. Our assistant auditor, Irene Giannopoulos, has worked tirelessly. Our acting budget director, Evan Lacasse, our auditor, Karen Praval, since she's been back. Even Marty Brophy, who generally as the treasurer wouldn't be involved, because we meet as a team every week. He and his deputy, Bethany Couture, have brought ideas to the table about how we can exercise greater oversight. And so most definitely that's already happening, and our team are working tirelessly. And I can tell you long hours and weekends because they're dedicated to making improvements there.
Okay. Good. I appreciate that. How the Chapter 324 reserve, and if you said this earlier, I apologize, I missed it. How much cash is in there today?
$7,947,925. We're proposing to use all of the funds in that reserve for this purpose.
That's okay. So I did catch that the way. So we are depleting that entirely.
Yes.
Which makes me extremely uncomfortable. I understand that we probably don't really have too many options aside from that. Do we as a city, because now what worries me is now we're in a position where we have depleted this reserve. God forbid something comes up that we didn't, that we couldn't have anticipated, right? Do we have other options, reserve options?
We do. We have a general stabilization fund that does not have a robust balance. It has a little more than $1 million in it right now. But we also have, that you created a couple of years ago, that pension stabilization fund that has over $22 million in it right now. That is not at all desirable to use, but in an emergency situation, there are provisions where the Secretary of Administration and Finance can authorize use of those funds for general purposes. And so it's because, in my opinion, because of the existence of that other substantial reserve fund that this makes sense. And as I said before, this Chapter 324 reserve was created specifically for an event like this. So the mayor is absolutely correct. It is required that money be replenished unless, and when I say the unless, I'm going to look directly at our state representative, unless it was created through a home rule petition, so the need to pay that back can be negated through a home rule petition. So I anticipate that should we be successful tonight, that sometime in the very near future, we'll be having a discussion with the delegation about a home rule petition in the next legislative session to relieve us of that requirement. There's no guarantee that that'll occur, but that is part of our plan.
One other thing, councilors, we've truly, and I want to thank Solicitor Bridges as well. She's been phenomenal through this whole process. I work with her and Troy every single day on this. We are trying to think outside the box, and I would encourage and welcome any of your suggestions on any other potential revenue sources for the city of Brockton. There is one we're looking at right now, solar. We were reached out right before the pandemic about a company on the West Coast that was interested in locating solar in the city of Brockton. At that time, again, it was several years ago, they floated a $30 million. Now, is that fake? I don't know. But I can tell you that we have to come up and thinking outside the box of other opportunities to bring some more money back into the coffers. We have to. That's our duty.
And the thought that we would seek not to replace that, God, that makes my stomach turn. Because we'd be really up a creek right now if that money wasn't there. I mean, I think we could all agree. We'd be in a real bad situation. So not replacing it, or the thought we would even consider or make that request, is certainly concerning to me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Let me follow up beyond that, though. Realistically, how long do you realistically think it would take the city to replenish this fund that we are depleting? It obviously would take many years, but how many roughly?
Well, I believe, and I'll have to go back, and we'll rely on our legal folks to advise us, but I believe the language of Chapter 324 require us to replenish it the following year. So, which is why the suggestion that I made that
Now
we
I
be
understand
relieved
why.
of that requirement. But and again, I'm stepping outside of my area of expertise, but I believe procedurally any home rule petition would have to come before the council anyway, right?
Yes.
So it's not a unilateral decision that we would make to pursue that option. Any decision to go that route would come before you and have robust discussion and would need your assent.
Right. And I think replacing that in 1 year with the other issues that are yet to come, the FY25 budget, CARES, 1 year is probably not realistic at all. But, so I can understand now with that why you might seek some flexibility on the timing of replenishing that. But I would hope that the goal would be, as soon as it is fiscally practical, to replenish that money, because thank God we have that available to us right now. And so, all right, moving on. The CARES Act deficit. Do we have any idea what that number is?
Yes. The CARES deficit is $3,308,456.
Jesus.
That was incurred, I don't know off the top of my head how many years that took to incur, I assume a few years. But those were expenses of the school department in response to the pandemic that were not reimbursed by the county's contributions.
Now, did we apply and they just disallowed it? They didn't feel that those expenditures fell under the CARES Act?
Now, I'd have to go back and check because obviously this is going back a few years and I was here when I think some of them were expenses that were incurred that were not allowable expenses. Others were just expenses that exceeded the total amount of that was about a $19 million reimbursement, I believe. And so they were expenses in excess of the total amount that we had available to us. I should say that, you know, we kept all the records on the city side, and the city did not exceed the required amounts. If we did, then those expenses were absorbed in the operating budget. But the state allows for a carryover of those COVID expenses, recognizing that many cities and towns had to exceed their allowable amounts to address the pandemic.
So are we not the only community that has a CARES Act deficit? Is that?
That's a good question. I do not know the answer to it, but I can,
Okay.
I can find out.
I'm just curious. It doesn't, I mean, it is what it is, right? I asked that because of the comment you just made, you know.
The only thing unique about the city of Brockton is we're in Plymouth County, so both ARPA, a tranche of ARPA, and CARES Act went directly from the feds to the county.
Right.
So I can't, I mean, we're the only city in Plymouth County. I don't know that, but we can look into that.
Just out of curiosity. You mentioned FY25, and obviously I won't be here to have to do that budget, but as a taxpayer, I will have to pay for that. And so it is in that context that I'm curious if you can expand on, when you alluded to issues in the FY25 budget, what were you referencing there or thinking?
Just that we, so simultaneously, we are working very closely to, with the school department to try to bring some order and understand exactly where we're at with the FY24 budget. As you know, I've been providing the school committee and you regular reports about the spending, but we are in the process of a pretty significant effort to actually quantify every position and how much it's getting paid and where that money is coming from. That sounds like pretty basic information, and frankly, if you asked me to do that on the city side, I could provide it to you tomorrow. But the way things are accounted for at the schools, that level of detail is not readily available, so we're working very hard to try to quantify that. Once we do, and that should be fairly soon, we'll be able to make a very realistic and informed projection on where we're at with FY24. And based on that information, we can begin to put together a proposed budget for FY25. Our goal, and of course, this requires the assent of the school committee because they put the budget together. What we would recommend is a budget for the school committee that mirrors the level of detail in the city budget. And the mayor mentioned that a few minutes ago. And so that you should be able to go in a year from now and know how much it costs to run the Gilmore School and how much it costs to run the Human Resources Department. And so that's the level of detail we're attempting. That's a significant effort because we're only a few months away from presenting those budgets. So once we can quantify what that number is going to be, and then we have to really work hard to try to develop revenues to support those operations, both for the school department and here at the city.
Is the school department on track to stay within its budget for FY24?
It's a really difficult question to answer. I can tell you that the report that we provide to the school committee currently, the answer to that question is yes. But one of the things we're working to quantify is whether or not there are expenses that are not being captured in the general fund. And so the trend is positive right now, but I cannot definitively say to you yes.
Explain to me how their expense is not being captured. Can you just?
So if people are paid out of revolving funds or grant funds that exist, that should be being paid out of the general fund. And so that's what this position project that we're undertaking that looks at, we've reached out, and I should recognize Sarah Butler, who is an accountant over at the school department, who is quarterbacking this project along with Open Architects, reached out to every principal and provided them records as to what positions we believe, based on our records, are in each building and what people are getting paid. And then that's mirrored in the departments, in HR and facilities and transportation. And so once that's done, we'll be able to actually have reliable data on what the weekly, monthly payroll is and where that money is coming from.
Okay. And just as a point of information that the mayor may not be aware of, in my capacity as the chair of Accounts Committee on the City Council, I requested some information from the school department. There has been no response, and I did send it in formatted as a public records request after not previously getting a response when I tried to go through other channels. So,
Who did you request it from, Council?
what's that?
Who did you request that from?
I can forward you the email. I don't remember everybody that was on it.
Yes,
I don't
please.
know that you were on it, but I believe the superintendent, they have a public records officer on the school side. That person was on it.
Please forward that to me in the morning, and Solicitor and I will get on it.
Okay, I
Thank you.
appreciate that. And I think the final thing that I want to end with is, first of all, I want to thank Vice Chair Ellers because she has done a spectacular job. Having been in that role myself in a time of crisis, obviously COVID, this is a much different matter. I really appreciate all of her efforts and understand just how difficult her job has been this year. You know, she has handled it very well, and I'm very appreciative of that. She's made herself available to me anytime I've needed to reach out to her with questions. So I did want to recognize her. And I do want to mention that I think Mrs. Sullivan's the only member of the committee who is here this evening, aside from the mayor, although, again, Mrs. Ellers did make herself available earlier today so that we could talk about this. So I want to thank Mrs. Sullivan for making the time this evening to be here.
And I do, just point of information, Council, and I concur with you, Kathy Ellis has been phenomenal.
Yep.
She's an expert in higher ed. She's been great. She really has. She couldn't make it tonight. She didn't want to disrespect any of you. She actually wanted to be here to support this endeavor, but she had a work engagement tonight, she told me, so that's why she's not here.
Right, and she did share with me that she did want to be here, but wasn't sure that that was going to pan out. But I appreciate the intent that she did want to be here and all of her efforts thus far, and again, to Judy for making the time to be here. And again, Mr. Clarkson, and I know the mayor, you've been involved in this, DOR, DESE. Irene from the auditing department, I can't thank you enough times because you had to step in as the auditor, do your regular job, and then be involved in this. And so I really want to thank Irene again. I have in the past, but I wanted to thank her as well as our solicitor who's been involved in this too, because this has been a total team effort for sure. And so I think that is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councillor Lally.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening.
Good evening, Councilor.
I want to immediately pick up off of what one of the last things Councilor D'Agostino said. We have made multiple requests, both as the individual members of the Accounts Committee and as the Accounts Committee, and through the Accounts Committee's clerk, for all sorts of information that we have never really received even an acknowledgement from the school department. One of the biggest things that we were asking about specifically were leases, contracts, and what other businesses were operated or maintained by the school department, which has never been made clear to us. The simple fact is a lot of these leases, we question their legitimacy. So that's money being spent without going through, the appropriate sign-off according to, municipal ordinance. And it demonstrates, the frustrations that we've picked up from the city side. It demonstrates from the school side an institutional ambivalence, a seeming a desire to not acknowledge the situation, which is not helping anyone. So, there's a lot of work to be done on that end. I think another thing that Councilor D'Agostino, said about, and Councilor Farwell as well, about needing to assert more control, more oversight over the finances of the department are very valid. I think, to be frank, for a little over $18 million, the school department just sold a significant portion of their autonomy. They cannot operate independently as they have been, as evidenced. I would just say, Mr. Clarkson, I know it was mentioned as a hypothetical, as a possibility, but I would stress that, you know, under pretty much any circumstance, don't touch the pension fund. We took great pains as a council, you know, working in concert with you and the mayor to establish that, because pensions are the #1 killer of city finances. Touching that after securing it the way it has been would be a historically dangerous decision. I know we have a rough idea about it, and I know that investigations are going on to dig deeper, but do we have any better idea than we did before about where what this money was actually spent on, the deficit?
Well, I think the 14.4 and the 3.9 are pretty clear. I mean, the 14.4 million is from an actual Munis report that shows how the money was spent. It was mostly spent on salaries for employees. And the 3.9 was clearly on out-of-district tuitions, on students with special needs that had to be educated or have services provided in places other than Brockton. I am by no means an expert on special education, so I want to be careful to qualify that. But the nature of that spending we can speak to.
I think we are going to need a pretty in-depth review of the staffing.
What did you say, Kyle? I couldn't hear that.
Staffing.
Staffing?
You know, personnel costs being the largest part of the deficit, but as has been compared quite a few times in these meetings, the city side is working with, you know, a quarter of what the schools have and are also required to pull the extra weight from the schools. It doesn't quite add up. To what you said, Mr. Mayor, about adding an auditing position to focus on the school department, I would be in favor of that.
Thank you, Councilor.
I would prefer, I think it needs to happen regardless, but I would stress that I think it would be important that that position be Schedule 19'd. And for the folks who may not know what Schedule 19 is, I think it should be paid for by the school department. I think the school department should pay for the auditor. They shouldn't control the auditor. The auditor needs to answer to our auditor. But the funds should come out of Schedule 19. It's, you know, that's the reason the auditor is there. A question that came from a statement you made, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Farwell about the school department's own audit. $99,000. How are they paying for that? And if there is a deficit next year, is that going to be a part of it? Are we going to audit the audit?
Yeah, I would say let's wait to see what the audit finds. The high end, those 3 firms that applied for the position, they were all interviewed. This was the second firm. They gave a high range, a low range and a high range. 99 grand was the high on that. It would be paid on the city side, right?
Well, the school audit, and we have this, that question was raised to me, I believe, at a school committee meeting.
It was, yep.
And the superintendent has the authority within the appropriation to determine funding priorities. And so the question was posed to me, is there money in the school budget to fund this audit? The answer is yes, if the superintendent determines that it's a funding priority.
And if the superintendent doesn't?
Well, that's a question, I think.
That's not something I'm willing to put $99,000 worth of faith on.
But within the appropriation that the school department has this year, the superintendent has the authority to dedicate some of those funds for the purposes of an audit.
All right. Now, can we have to do what we have to do this year. Not happy about it, but it is what it is. Can we shortchange in the next budget non-net school spending to offset the losses we are going to take in stabilization money or free cash? Now, I know that whatever is taken out of non-net will have to go back into non-net. That is not a long-term strategy, but it is a way to replenish what we lose while returning the school department's expenses to the department over time.
It's an interesting question that we can certainly look into. I mean, from a practical standpoint, the non-net is primarily the funding they use for transportation to fund the buses. So could they fund that program with less money than they're provided now?
Or could we take it from somewhere else?
It is most certainly worthy of examination. I don't know the answer to that question definitively, Councilor, but I think as we move toward your appropriation in June of both net and non-net spending, some of those discussions are certainly appropriate.
And they'll come up. These are just, questions we have around this. I had a couple of other questions that really have largely been addressed. I don't know if anyone's really in a position to dig too deep into certain aspects of the school's budget, but we'll pick that up at the appropriate time. I know that there was supposed to be a discussion with the leadership of the school department and committee related to some of these items. That resolve was not taken up in this legislative session. I hope it will be refiled in some way. And from that point, I think a lot of these questions are more appropriate. So I'm going to try and narrow that down. I do want to express, however, while I maintain the floor, my appreciation, again, for all the efforts of the folks on the city side who have had to go uphill to solve a problem that was not, their creation. I also want to acknowledge, again, like some of my colleagues did, the Ward 5 School Committee member, Judy Sullivan, as the only dedicated school official present. I want to express disappointment, and I know this is largely, as you've indicated with the timeline, is largely out of your control, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Clarkson, but in this term as a whole, across multiple issues unrelated, we have had a series of very important conversations, very important votes that have been done very last minute or with a clock on them. Hey, wait, we've got to really go on this. We still have time to have all our discussion and deliberation, and we make very sure of that. But every single time one of those happens, the council feels it, the council is aware of it, and that sort of bank of trust is eroded a little, that this is actually something urgent. So that is something I would just make you aware of for the future, that, the more last minute things we see, the more we wonder if last minute is more of a political phrase. And this is not. I want to be very clear, this is not, this has to happen, but we see a lot of last minute, and that's just something I think is important to me to address. The last thing I'll say,
Council,
because
just if I could address
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I think it's important, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I also want to thank the clerk, Tim Cruz. I have a department head every other week on Wednesday. Tim hasn't missed one other than just recently. And we go around, and he truly reiterates time is of the essence out of respect for all of you. And, you know, I guess for good or for bad, I'm the leader right now, so it falls on me. So I want to apologize if people feel that way, and we will do a better job going into the new year with the department heads to make sure that all the information is timely. But you are correct. Today is one of those times of the essence. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The last thing I would have to say, and this is more to my frustrations, not to you or Mr. Clarkson, but to, you know, the situation. And I'm not going to delve too deep into, you know, frustration, because frustration is unproductive at this time. But if the school department deficit were a standalone city-side department, it would be the 6th largest department in the city government. The only things larger would be the sewer department, the water department, police, fire, and HR. And that, I think, when you appreciate the scope of all those other departments and all the services they offer, is truly staggering to the measures that the department has taken or has not taken, and the respect it shows to its city-side counterparts who could literally run more than half of the city with that money. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. Councilor Mendez.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here tonight. I mean, also getting lots of calls from union members, because since the money is being taken from the city side, our city workers, they're concerned. Are they at risk of losing their jobs or being laid off because of this huge deficit, or how secure is the union workers and the city workers? Because that's been a concern that I've been hearing too.
Thank you, Representative Councilor at Large. I mean, I'm a labor mayor, and I support unions. And a few months ago, I had a Zoom with SEIU just for that purpose. People were very concerned. And I told them that we would continue to have regular updates. It's all about transparency. It is not my desire for anybody to lose any jobs whatsoever. It's not my desire. And as you know, on the city side last year, nobody lost a job. Now, on the school side, it was a little different. So I can look you and your teammates in the eye right now and say, my hope is that not one single job is lost. But again, we're 6 months into the current budget. We have a lot of work to do to go into 25. I am concerned about 25. I really am. Free cash is utilized a lot to help balance the budget. Replenishing, stabilization, I have sleepless nights on that. But at the end of the day, I want to assure all the union employees, dedicated union employees that we have, great people. As a mayor and as a former councilor and as a taxpayer, as a guy that grew up in the city of Brockton, I respect them, I honor them, and my goal is to make sure that not one job is lost.
Yeah, thank you. Also, you mentioned that we have to raise receipts in order to cover for these expenses. Can you just elaborate a little bit further what it's really going to cost the residents that are watching tonight? What can they expect to see that it's going to be more money? Is it real estate taxes that they're going to be getting that is going to be double or tripled? Can we just let the residents know a little bit more what these raise in receipts are? And
Yes. Thank you for that question. To clarify, what we are doing is raising revenue estimates for the current fiscal year to coincide with what we actually collected last year. So raising this additional revenue will not increase costs or fees for city residents. It simply brings our revenue projections in line with the money that we collected for those fees last year. So, for instance, we're raising our estimate for excise revenue. So everyone pays motor vehicle excise. There's very few people that pay a boat excise tax. There are a few boats in the city. Personal property. Those revenues and the amounts that are paid are already assessed to the residents. We're not proposing as part of this plan to increase those. That's done, the increase in any fee is something that has to separately be considered. We're increasing the projections for building permit revenue. We're not raising building permit fees, but because of all the construction in the city, the revenue the last several years for building permits has been very robust. So we have significantly exceeded our projections because of all the construction, but we've kept the projections low so that we realize more revenue than we projected, and that creates free cash. So it's the same with licenses and other permits. We're not proposing that we increase license fees to increase this revenue. We're simply increasing the projections to be more in line with the revenue we actually receive. So this is money that we're almost certain, certainly very confident, will come in this year. We're simply raising our estimates to meet the money that we actually get.
So raising receipts really would in turn be less free cash that will be on the following fiscal year
That's absolutely
because
correct,
we're
yes.
going to be sort of leveled
Right.
in that sense, but not direct increased cost to the residents, at least at this point.
Correct.
Okay. The other question that I have is, I had a long conversation today with TJ. He's from the State Department that has been working directly with the school side, with the finances. And it was confusing, and I'll just hope that you'll be able to clarify. So when the city council approves the school side budget, it's supposed to be uploaded in the Munis, and then you gave us the Munis report. But apparently the school side also has another account that transfers money to that account, and that's where it gets confusing on how to properly account what is being expended. So do we still use, I think it's like a $11.99 account, whatever the account is called. Do we still use that? What is the purpose for that account, or how? Just, it was confusing, so I'm hoping that you'll be able to clarify what that is.
Absolutely. So we don't, if you look at the city's budget in Munis, it mirrors the budget that you can get online and the one that you approved. One of the challenges is, first of all, the actual budget approved by the school committee is in very broad categories. I think, and remember we had this discussion last June about the budget book is significant detail, but the actual budget for the city is the budget order that you pass, which has salaries and wages, goods and supplies, purchase of services. But we further, in Munis, create more detail so that we can accurately track how we're spending. But we've talked often at these meetings about those statutory categories. So personal services, goods and supplies, purchase of services. The school budget is very, very broad, and I think there were like four, the budget voted by the school committee doesn't break out that expenditure by department. It's all overall expenditures. And so the practice has been that a significant amount of the money is held in what's called a 199 account. And that's what TJ was discussing. And what that means is the practice has been to hold tens of millions, perhaps more than $100 million in that account and disperse it as the money is needed for educational purposes. The challenge with that approach is it doesn't allow for the level of detail to be able to track expenses. And so that's been a point of a significant amount of work and a point of frustration to try to understand the spending and why our recommendation will be to adopt a school budget that's more reflective of the level of detail in the city budget. So the high school will have its own departmental budget. Each elementary school will have their own departmental budget, rather than all of the spending being lumped in a few accounts where it's really difficult to then understand where those cost centers are.
But at this point, that account is still being used and effective.
Correct.
That's still the operation of the school department as
Absolutely.
of today.
Yes.
Is that a norm abroad, other school systems outside, to just have that separate account and keep so much money that it's not as detailed and accounted for, given so much latitude to the school department to just, I
do
don't
not
know how to
believe so.
phrase it,
No.
but it didn't seem like a normal procedure.
It certainly doesn't give us the ability to be accountable to you and tell you how the money is being spent. And so that's why we've already instituted some of the controls that I talked about earlier in terms of position control and moving money around. There is a budget in Munis, but it does not match the budget passed by the school committee, so that's what makes it really difficult to track. And I've had this discussion with the school committee. So yes, we can print out a Munis report that shows what money has been spent, but no, that doesn't exactly match the budget that was passed. So we've got some significant work to do to bring the kind of accountability that we believe we have here.
Yeah, and I understand the seriousness of what the whole thing that we're having to do here tonight, and that's why I'm trying to be as respectful as possible. But it's really shocking and disturbing when we find out these things. And I know the responsible thing to do here tonight is to approve this, and I'm ready to go ahead and approve it. But I really ask and beg that going forward, we are taking the appropriate steps to be more accountable to the taxpayers, accountable to the residents, accountable to the parents, accountable to the students, because our number one job is to educate our students. And I'm not frustrated to be here tonight on a holiday week at all. I would be here tomorrow. I would be here as many days as necessary. I'm frustrated of the lack of accountability, a lack of respect to our students that are really being the ones that are just being harmed by how we're just proceeding. And at times I ask myself, wouldn't it be better if the state just came and took over? Because how are we doing better than the state would come and do it? So I understand that that's a whole nother level that we don't want to put ourselves in. But we have to do better. So, and the question is, are we doing better? Does this solve the problem? Does this eliminate or prevent the state from coming and taking over? And are we better educating our kids, knowing what the kids really need and deserve, and providing them that level of education here in America that we're educating our kids? I'm a product of public education, so I know that means a lot. And our city deserves better. And it's just really frustrating just to be put in this position and to not know how we're just going to move forward and face our parents when they call us and they tell us that their students spend an entire week at the cafeteria because there's no teachers, or that we turn on the news and we just hear our city being talked about in ways that we know is not fair to our students, or a parent calling that their child is a senior and they're concerned that the fact that they're just missing crucial classes is going to hurt their chances to get into a good college and a good education. So are we guaranteeing our parents that we're really going to be better off, that we're really willing to make the hard decision? Like, is this new school members that are going to be sworn in a week from Monday, a new school city councilors that are going to be sworn in, all of us together? And I don't want to blame any department or blame one person or the other, because it's just playing a blaming game. But it's really all of us taking this ownership and looking at our kids and our students, our parents, our teachers, and all of us in the eyes and say, we are working together. This is a sense of urgency that we're really here for the students, and we're going to do better and prevent this from really happening, because it's just not how we should be doing it. So I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, Representative Councilor Lodge. I mean, I too am a product of the Brockton Public Schools, as is my wife, and our youngest is at West. And, you know, Brockton Public Schools served us extremely well, and Brockton High served us extremely well. In fact, my dad worked there for 30 years. Can we do better? Do we owe better to the students? Yes. Do we owe better to the staff? Yes. We are elected officials during good times and bad times. This is a terrible time right now, absolutely terrible time. And so we have to work together right now to come up with a solution to the problem, number one. But that's only step one. Step two is to figure out how we move forward together. And, you know, when we all get sworn in on the 1st, you know, that's a time of continuing to collaborate. And it doesn't help to fracture. It doesn't help to offend. It's about really why we serve. At least that's my view, and I know that's shared by everybody here. And so I can just make a pledge that I'll be the mayor again for the next term, and my goal is not as the mayor, but as a parent, to make sure that every kid that goes to the Brockton Public Schools gets the education that they need, because it truly is not just a responsibility or a fiduciary duty, it's an obligation that we need to do. We owe it to them. So that's the pledge I'll make, and you know, I just hope and pray that, and thanks to you and your delegation, I will say this, Rita and Michelle and Jerry and Mike, they meet with me on a regular basis. We would be in a dire strait right now, even worse, if Student Opportunity Act didn't come to fruition to help Brockton. So we will be coming to visit you when you leave this chamber and you go back to Beacon Hill, but that's how I feel at this point. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Councilor Lodge.
Thank you.
Councilor Minichiello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to first start off also saying thank you for school committee person Judy Sullivan for being here tonight. I think it says a lot about Judy, and I think it says a lot in a positive way. And with regard to the other school committee members, I know that they're not happy and that they're not, and they're taking this very hard. All of them are taking this very hard. And there's a good reason, because what I'm hearing is that something is really broken at all levels. We're here for transparency and fiscal responsibility, and to provide information and to share information, and we're all part of the city, and we're all part of the system. And I really feel that we need to work together. Everything that was said by Councilor Mendez, Councilor D'Agostino, Councilor Farwell, Councilor O'Lally, it's all true, and it all needs to be addressed. But we really need to work together. And to this point, I feel like we are all working in silos. I do not feel that we're sharing information. I do not feel that the city council, that we've had a lot of information and know where things are at. And we need to work together to find out how to move forward in a fiscally responsible way that benefits the students and the taxpayers. So hear me out. Apparently, we've spent more than what we provided to the schools, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that tells me that the schools needed more money, because what I'm hearing is that what's being spent is on out-of-district placement for special ed, transportation, teaching positions, programs, things that, you know, are being provided to the students. But something's broken, because the common person, the reasonable person would say, wow, they spent all this money on kids, right? Great. That must be one heck of a school system. It must be running like a top. They spent more money than what they had. So there must be some benefit going to these kids. But we all know that kids, just like Councilor Mendez said, they're sitting in the CAFs, and they don't have substitutes. There's safety issues that people are telling us about at Brockton High. Councilor Farwell is concerned about things. All the councilors are concerned about things. Everyone's just talking about the same issues. Something's broken, at all levels. When I first heard about this issue, I'm trying to figure out, how does this happen? I'm on the school committee. I'm vice chair of the school committee for a number of years, and I'm saying to myself, how does this work? How does this happen? And the fact that I had so many questions tells me that there's a problem. This monster is using your words, is so broad, it's so hard to accurately track. There's so many funds, there's so many bank accounts. When and we're all trying to learn about how did this happen, what happened, how can we prevent it from happening. We don't have all the answers yet, and I don't think we really are close to having the answers yet. And I'm not pointing the finger saying someone did this, someone did that. I'm just saying something's broken and it needs to be fixed, and it's not nearly fixed because certain questions you're not confident with the answers, and that's a reasonable response if you're not confident with the answers. The fact that at first I thought, oh wow, they're bouncing checks. How could they be? Checks are being bounced. No, checks aren't being bounced. You accurately shared information when I call you up. You give me information, and I'm saying, well, I'm trying to understand this. How could they not be bouncing checks? Well, somehow the system is that the checks, the invoices come in, and City Hall pays them. City Hall pays them. Monies are coming in for different things, and the money keeps flowing in, and City Hall pays the bills. Well, that tells me, in a layman or just not an accountant, I'm an attorney. Math is very easy for us. A third, that's the math we know. A third of a case, okay? Easy math. But with this monster, monies are coming in all the time. And I scratched my head and I'm saying to myself, okay, wait a minute. Monies are coming in, so shouldn't there be some sort of when the invoice comes in, some sort of reconciliation that, okay, this money is for X, Y, and Z. Yes, we have the Munis report or whatever the report is. Yep, the money's coming from that. Great. But it's not as simple as that. Because the money is coming in and it's flowing in. There obviously needs to be more accountability at all levels in terms of making this more streamlined, simplified, taking control of the accounts. Forgetting about who did anything wrong or if anything was wrong. Obviously, people spent money on what they thought was good and what kids needed. Okay, that tells me that the schools, for whatever reason, needed more money. For whatever reason. During the budget process, I don't remember anyone from the schools coming to me saying, Tom, what we're asking for is not enough. We need more money for this, or we need more money for that. No one came and asked me for more money. The budget process went through, and then as time went on, we hear about, the parents complaining about lack of this, lack of that, safety in the schools. We needed monitors in the bathroom. We needed monitors on the buses. So obviously, that costs money. Those things weren't contemplated. But, we're all thinking, or I'm under the impression that the system, the processes that are in place are doing the the fiscal checks and balances on this. So this six-headed monster needs to be streamlined. It's obvious. That's obvious. And the fact that a question was asked, for this year, are we going to be in a deficit? And the fact that we don't know the answer to that, when we found out about this in August, and it's now almost, it's almost the end of December, and we don't know if the schools are going to be in a deficit, and we're going to sit here and point the finger at the school committee when we don't know, the people that are in the know, the auditors, the accountants, or whatever, the financial people, they can't tell us that. We're expecting the school committee to tell us that. Something is broken and needs to be fixed. And there needs to be more of a team effort in this whole thing. We want to be a team. We need to be involved at all levels with each other. With respect to some good ideas, I'm hearing good ideas up here. Just to throw out a couple that we really do need to implement, we need to have a quarterly meeting, a financial meeting with the schools and with the school committee so that we can figure out where we're all at. You know, we don't know where we're at today in fiscal 2025. So, you know, we've got to figure out a system that puts a process in place so that we know where we're at in fiscal 2025, that there is reconciliation when those bills are being paid, and we know what accounts they're coming from. There needs to be some sort of system that obviously still doesn't exist, and the taxpayers have every right to think that we're getting this beast under control. And it's still not under control from what I can see, you know, and I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. It needs to be simplified. Somehow the accounts have got to go into fewer accounts. There needs to be less hands on the button, or certainly on the ability to alter munis, and I'm sure that piece has been taken care of. But, you know, there's so many different issues at play here, and to blame people, you know, is not going to get us where we need to be. We need to put in a process that makes sense, that allows the city to be fiscally responsible. I mean, Councilor Farwell, you know, he lived through this once before. He's shocked that we're in the same place we are today. You know, this is a person that never thought we would see this again, and I guess I'm pretty naive to think that when bills come in, we know where the money is coming from to pay those bills. And that is a system we have got to create so that there is accountability, reconciliation, whatever you want to call it, accurate tracking, because it hasn't existed and it needs to exist. With respect to the monies that we now owe, how much can we recapture? Meaning, you know, we put in for reimbursements. Are we going to get any of that money back from the state? And will any of that money, if we are getting money back, replenish any of our accounts that we are draining? And we obviously need to drain, but we don't want to drain, and we certainly are shocked that we have to drain them, you know, to resolve this situation. It's not acceptable, and it can't be acceptable going forward ever again. But are we going to recapture any of those funds in terms of reimbursements that the state or any federal grant, you know, are we eligible for any recapture of money that will help us for next year?
The answer to that question is yes. When you look at the free cash calculation, those deductions, so long as those accounts, the monies that are owed are received, those deductions will not exist next year. So one of our goals is to, one by one, individually, address each of those accounts, and either by using the school budget to address those needs, or by working, whether it's a grant, to make sure the grant money is received in a timely manner, reducing those reductions so that when we do the free cash calculation next year, there aren't so many deductions. So, because remember, we had, as I've discussed with you before, our last year's revenues were $10 million over projections, but we also had $10 or $11 million in budgeted funds, the budget that you approved, that we did not spend. So we had a substantial amount of funds available, but those monies were reduced by these reductions on the free cash. So we still watch our budget very closely and have the opportunity, if we finish this fiscal year with budgeted but unspent funds, those funds will go to free cash, and if we address many or most of these accounts, then yes, we will have the ability to have substantially more free cash than $4 million next year, even with the reduction that we will see because we're increasing our revenue projections. So that's a really important priority for all of us, to address those issues. And I agree wholeheartedly, Counselor, that the system is broken and that we need to all work together to fix it.
I just think we should be further along at this point in terms of having more answers for the public. Another issue that was brought up is, by Councilor Farwell and Councilor D'Agostino mentioned too, the audit, and actually Councilor Lally, with regard to the $99,000 so far that's been spent on the school side on their audit, okay? So,
Council, it hasn't been spent yet.
okay, that's what's been set aside for it? What is that number?
That $99,000 was the cost, the high cost of the firm that was selected. When they applied and they were interviewed, they gave a high and a low of what their services rendered would cost, and the high was 99.
Okay, so if we don't know if the school department or that the school budget is going to be in a deficit, how can, and this audit was not contemplated in their budget, how do they pay for it without getting authorization from us and coming before us? I don't understand how they can be paying for an audit without first asking for more money from us, because this audit was not contemplated in any of their budgeting process for last year's budget. Is not the city council supposed to be the approval? I mean, we have department heads that come in here for hundreds of dollars, $1,000. Mr. Carpenter came in for $1,200. And he felt bad that he was coming to us, that he was overspending $1,200. I mean, my hat goes off to these department heads. I mean, talk about doing their job. But there was no contemplation of any monies for an audit. Don't they have to come to the city council to approve that as a non-budgeted item that needs vetting by the city council through the finance committee and then on to the city council for approval? I thought this is what the process is, that we approve the money. It wasn't that allocation was not part of any budget, and it was not contemplated before August of this year when we found out about this situation.
I believe, although you are absolutely correct, I'm sure they didn't contemplate a $99,000 audit, that once you appropriate in this fiscal year that $219 million for the schools, they have broad authority to decide spending priorities. And so the simple fact that they didn't anticipate the expense does not mean they don't have the authority to prioritize the expense.
But they've spent more than what they've been given. And we, at this point, do not know if they're going to spend more this year. I mean, so it seems like, again, when I say the system's broken, the fact that that allocation was never considered or discussed, and the fact that we don't know if they're going to go over again, so it's basically saying, here, you've got an open checkbook. Yeah, the council gave you this amount of money, but, if you spend over what they gave you, you're just going to go to the council and they're going to figure out a way to pay it. Something's not right there. I mean, so to me, that expenditure, if we don't know the school side cannot tell us if they're going to be in the black, then any non-contemplated expense should not be paid on the city side. So when that bill comes into the city, it hasn't been approved as part of the budgeting process. I don't see how the city can just pay the bill, and that's part of the problem that happened. Things were getting paid by the city side that they just sent the bills over, and again, something's broken that can happen. And so what I'm hearing is that we don't know if they're going to overspend this year. So if they just send bills over right now, the same thing to me can happen, I guess. I mean, Am I wrong? Maybe tell me I'm wrong. I hope you're going to tell me I'm wrong.
In this instance, yes, Counselor, I do believe you're wrong, because remember what I...
Why am I wrong?
So, what I talked about a few minutes ago, that the budget override capacity that existed for school employees has been revoked. Although the budget is in very broad categories, we have instituted spending controls.
But you told me that we don't know if fiscal 20, even with these spending controls, we don't know if they're going to go over budget this year. That tells me that the fiscal controls aren't strong enough or not.
Well, I would say to you, there's a difference between the fiscal controls that we've put in place and quantifying particularly the personnel spending and where people are getting paid from. So we are working on having a definitive figure. Now, when we produce that report for the school committee every 2 weeks, it shows, based on what's in Munis, that they are below projections to get to June 30th, that the spending is well within the prescribed budget. But I owe it to you and to the public to answer questions thoroughly and honestly. And so this position review that we're currently doing will tell us if there are positions that are being funded from other places that are not hitting the general fund budget.
So then, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But that does not mean that the school department doesn't have any authority to spend other portions of the budget. And so I'm not disagreeing with the point you're making, but I think the practical implication of the authority that the school department has when the city council provides them with their appropriation under the current construct, I don't think there's a mechanism to say, well, the audit's going to cost $99,000 and you didn't anticipate that, so that bill should not be paid. I think it's a discussion that we should have. I think if you have quarterly meetings with the school committee, it's very much appropriate for discussion. But I don't believe, and we're drifting into, I think, a question that brings in the legal authority of the schools under ed reform and what authority the superintendent has. Yep. So I'm getting a little outside my area of expertise.
It's going a little micro, but so let's go back to macro. The fact of the matter is that if we can't tell that they're going to be in the black for fiscal 25, there's still a problem with our accountability or, our reconciliation or what have you.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
There needs to be some system, and I'm not the financial guy to figure it out. That's for people like you. That needs to be put in place as the checks and balances fiscally, so that we all can be confident that what we send over is what's going to be spent, and what's spent, the reconciliation when the bill gets paid, is what was contemplated in the school committee's budget. So when they come up with their budget and have sort of the micro specifics, that there's some sort of system that is, yep, this is where this money is. Now, there's always going to be a little, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be to the penny. I understand that. And things come up in a school year. Things come up in a school year. You certainly have situations that come up with students, with kids, an emergency, a boiler breaks, this breaks, a roof falls, all sorts of, all the electricity went out in those schools. My God, yes, there's things that we cannot contemplate, but we need to have the system in place that can deal with the regular mundane day-to-day bills, and then we have to have that system in place, that teamwork, that trust between both sides of the fence here, that there is a process that when those things come up, you don't handle it on your own. we don't want heroes here. We want a team. There's no, the best teams are the teams that win together, right? There needs to be a process in place that you simply talk to the city council. You go through the process. You talk to the mayor, then the mayor needs to talk to the city council. There needs to be more communication and a system in place that when these things come up, they might need more money. And if they do, we all discuss about where that money's going to come from, how we're going to pay for it. I mean, the fact that this thing has grown to almost $20 million, that's a problem. That's a problem, because I'm sure that when this ball got rolling, it wasn't $20 million. So so again, there needs to be something in place that we know that we're not going over again. And the fact that it was able to, grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, that's a problem, And again, I'm not pointing the finger at one person. I'm saying the system is broken, that it can get to $20 million. When we have department heads that are crying to us, we're sorry, we're coming in asking for $2,200. Are you kidding me? I mean, again, we need to work together. We need more information. This council has, we have gotten so little information on this thing. It is disappointing from all levels, from every direction. I understand that there's legalities involved, but I think that when people ask me, the only way I get information is if I call people and put people in awkward positions and try to get information. I think that it shouldn't be like that. It should not be like that the council is not getting information. People want to come to the council for monies. Well, that means that we are involved with more than just the monies. If you've got to justify why you're getting the money. And so that means that answers to questions need to be asked, and sharing of information so that the taxpayer knows what's going on, so that I know what to tell the taxpayer. I still don't know what to tell the taxpayer, and is this under control? It needs to be really, really quick, because too much time is passing, and where we don't know that the door is locked at this point. That's not good. So again, I thank you all for coming in. Again, we're in this together. This is something that we need to put together and fix, because we are supposed to be transparent as politicians here. We are supposed to provide fiscal responsibility. We are supposed to share information. We're not supposed to be hiding the football and basically, we're on this team. No, we're one team. We're Brockton, and this is not a proud day for Brockton. This is not a great meeting to have. And I know everyone is somber, and I know the school committee feels horrible, and I think that the fiscal beast that exists, it's beyond the school committee. It's beyond many of the people in this room. It's that know about finance. It's just very complicated. It needs to be streamlined. Absolutely. So, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Councilor Rodriguez.
I was about to fall asleep because
Sorry, Councilor Rodriguez.
Oh, it's not your fault. I think I asked a little while ago, but I was almost like forgetting about what I needed to. Councilor, you said something that's interesting.
Trouble?
No. You said that it's not like they bounced checks. It is. They bounced $18 million worth of checks. Because it's like you running your household. You've got, $1,000 to spend a month, and you decide to spend $1,500, and you're going to bounce some checks. According to Mr. Clarkson here, you said that, I had it all wrong, because here I am defending the system, saying the $14 million came about because we bought buses and all these other things, but you stated that it came from salaries, that the bulk of it came from salaries? That's what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I don't have a triple PhD from Harvard. As a matter of fact, I've got a lousy UMass degree from the UMass system. graduated from Brockton High. I don't remember how well I did back in the days, but if the deficit was brought to us by salaries, and we haven't done anything to reduce those salaries, I can tell you that with certainty that we're going to have a deficit. Again, we don't have to be super PhD types here to figure this stuff out, because from what I understand, very few people have lost their jobs due to this. If this actually had happened in the private sector, where you blow 10% of your budget, heads would roll from the board to the department heads to a whole bunch of people, because it's not just one person or two or three people that actually overspent $20 million worth, $20+ million worth. So I have heard that the superintendent is on medical leave, and the other two financial guys are on leave. But yet we haven't done anything to the department. The finance department across the street is larger than yours. And you have the overall responsibility of running both places, this and that. The payroll department across the street is larger than our payroll department. The auditor's office, whose job it is to audit this whole thing, I think their part across the street is larger than what we have. The same holds true with HR. So you've got these humongous departments out there running a portion of the city's budget, but yet no one lost anything, because it's not real money. It's city money. It's government money. But you know, sadly, who's actually going to pay for this? The kids in this city. The kids sitting in the cafeteria because we don't have enough teachers in the classroom. The taxpayers who, and we talked about this the other day, Mr. Mayor, who again, according to Council Farwell, were bailing out the school system in the neighborhoods of $20+ million. So the taxpayers whose roads could have gotten fixed, whose work could have got done with 10% of the $20 million that we're going to be spending on that bailout of the school system, are going to do without. They're going to see their taxes go up, because no matter how we look at it, their taxes will go up. And these are taxes that we could have reduced if we had that $20 million overage that we can kind of lessen the blows of taxes to the taxpayers in this community. But yet the thing that shocks me is that we haven't done anything across the street to reduce salaries. We haven't done anything. As a matter of fact, the salary of the school department as of today, it's the same salary that we had before we knew of this. We're still paying people on leave, paying people on this, paying people on that. So we haven't touched the monster that we have talked about in terms of serious reduction. Is if that actually had happened on the city side, I'm sure that an assistant here and there would be gone, a couple of people in your office would be gone, a couple of people in the mayor's office would be gone to kind of balance things out. But yet we haven't done anything like that in the school department. And yet, let me put it to you this way. We're going to go back next year. We're going to have the same exact problem come this August. It might not be 14 million, but it'll be in the neighborhood. It'll be a cousin of 14, because we haven't done anything to reduce it. Not a single person has lost their job. Not that I'm advocating for job loss, but I'm thinking that if you're not really cutting it and somehow things aren't going well, people should lose their jobs. Not teachers in the classroom, because that affects the kids directly. But there's people sitting out there, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I hear how great of a job everybody is doing. The school committee is doing a great job. This is doing a great job. So who's doing a lousy job? Who is? The poor mayor? Who's sitting here getting COVID every day? Is that who's doing a lousy job? Is it us? we're sitting here at 9 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night talking about how we're going to bail out the schools? Is it we are doing the lousy jobs? I remember when I first got to this council, I was told, do not ask any questions of the schools. Basically, look at their, they're coming in asking for this, agree to this, do not ask anything else, because you know what? None of it is your business. Because that's the feeling that we had, that they did whatever they did. And I was talking to Councilor Thompson not too long ago. I thought we only had one CFO in this city. Right? I thought we had one CFO, and that's Mr. Clarkson. But then I found out that we actually had another CFO in the schools, who was not obligated to give me anything because he was not the CFO of the city of Brockton. He was the CFO of the school, and yet the city has to funnel money to that CFO so that that CFO can decide to do whatever he wants to do. So my question to you, Mr. Clarkson, since you're kind of overseeing this, are there plans to reduce any salaries in the school side? Again, not the teachers, not the classroom help. Some positions that we have up there that either you need to take over, bring across the street to this building, or be eliminated because you know what? They're redundant. It makes absolutely no sense that we have $14 million worth of deficit and we know where it comes from, but yet we don't do anything about it to reduce it. And this is what I think the council from Ward 1 was saying, is that we don't see you can actually put in all these stop gaps, all these guardrails, but if you don't reduce the monster that we have, it's not going to make a difference. So what? You have better accounting. Oh, shoot, they're over $1 million this month. Oh, shoot, they're over $2 million this month. That's all you're going to be doing, because there's no guardrails to prevent that from happening. Because if the salaries is what brought the deficit, we haven't done anything with that. You have assistants to assistants to assistants across the street. When you're struggling in your office, you can't even get any help because we haven't provided you with the funds. Because from now on, as we move forward, when we're discussing budget, we're going to have to set aside some monies to bail out the school in the future again, because that's the way it's going to go. Every time you suggest something to them, it's we can't talk about that. No, we can't do it that way. It's collective bargaining. We can't talk about this. You can't talk about that. Anytime somebody brings up anything to them, we can't talk about it. I told the acting superintendent the other day that there is no reason for those kids to be sitting in the cafeteria. There's 11 of us on this council. We can each volunteer 1 day a week to board the hell out of those kids. And those kids would not be sitting in the cafeteria if each one of us took a class a week. If a call came to this building saying we need somebody, substitutes, to go to the high school and help us out, I'm sure there will be plenty of people from this building that would say, you know what, I'll volunteer a day. I'll show up there for a day. It's to think outside the box. If we have a problem, we can't get substitutes. Why are we not thinking outside the box to help these kids? No, let's put them in the cafeteria. Let's continue to do the same thing. You know that old saying, continue to do the same thing in hopes that we get different results. That's what we continue to do. But I want to ask you one question, since we're supposed to be asking questions. What was your relationship like to the people in the finance department at schools prior to this whole debacle? Mr. Clarkson. Oh. What was it like?
It was cordial, cooperative. We invited representatives of the schools to join us at our weekly finance meetings that I have with our entire team.
Or was it basically them just kind of giving you an overall run of things, or them coming to you and say, this is our books, take a look at our books?
No, it was definitely the former, not the latter.
Because this has been a problem for a long time. We've been building this up for quite some time.
Absolutely.
So this is it just didn't happen in August of 2023. It's been going on for quite some time, where you're not allowed, basically, we had a budget hearing in May? We were told that everything were roses across the street. This is the program that we're planning on doing. This is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're going to be doing. There was never mention of any problems that we were going to have, either with kids sitting in the cafeteria or the fact that we have now an over $20 million deficit. You know, so my hope is that, you know, we go back, and I mentioned this to you the other day, that we need to somehow come up with some subcommittees that we can put together between this body and the school committee and the city itself to come up with some real conversations and how are we going to fix this if we're going to do it together. Because you know what? It's not fair to the taxpayers of this city to come back next year and try to figure out where we're going to get another few $1 million to bail out the school again. You know? Because you know what? Then what might happen, you know what? Some of us will hold back and say, you know, let the state come in and do what it needs to do, because it cannot continue to happen. You know, but we need to put together a real committee that will work together in the sense to solve these issues. Because it's perfectly fine for the school committee or the schools to say, well, we'll overspend and send the bill to the city to pay. Well, you know what? The city isn't going to pay it anymore. We're not. If we are not part of the solving committee, you know, the solvers of this issue, we're not going to pay for it. Because it's not fair to the people that actually put us here. Because the people that put us here to fix their roads. You know, to come up with some recreational places for their kids to play. And to make sure that we provide the funding so that their kids are not sitting in the cafeteria, you know, watching God knows what through their phones. You know, but that's what we need to do. And work at this and really put the guardrails in place that actually prevents this thing from ever happening again. Because if we come back here in August again, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to get the sympathetic thing. None of us here want to see the city in receivership. None of us. I don't think there's one single person here besides maybe young Lally that's sitting way down there.
Hey, what?
None of us, including Lally, doesn't want to see the city in receivership. But you know what? It's frustrating as hell for us to go back and tell the taxpayers that, oh, by the way, we could have fixed all these roads, but we can't because we just piped over $9.5 million to the schools. Oh, we can't do anything in terms of a rock falling from the sky and hitting whatever. We can't fix it because our stabilization account is now down to zero because we kind of drained it all out because we had to bail the schools out. And you know what? There's got to be consequences. There's got to be consequences. You know, and it cannot be done on the backs of the teachers, where we're going to go down and say all these young teachers that came in, they got to be gone so that we can cut back. No, it needs to be done at that building. That building needs to pay for it. That building caused it, and that building needs to pay for it. Not the high school, not the elementary schools, not the junior highs or the middle schools. That building needs to pay for it. And those departments need to be reduced in order to make up the difference. You know, because again, if this had happened in a private world, in private business, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. You would be telling us we eliminated these numbers of positions, these numbers of positions, these numbers of positions to make up the deficit. Not to come back to the coffers or the bank here to say, give me some more money so I can go bail them out. And it's to bail them out doing the same thing. Because it doesn't matter who you bring into your office to do special financing or whatever, if you don't cut where the problem is. You need to cut that. If the salaries were a problem, we need to cut the salaries. And that's the only thing we can do. But we need to see those solutions coming down the pipeline. You know, because otherwise, we're going to be sitting here talking about this, you know, probably even before the end of the year, before the budget hearings. You know, and I actually had one last question for you. You talked about the CARES Act funds that they submitted items that were not reimbursed by the CARES Act. Is there a possibility that you can kind of reach back out to the county or even the federal government to see if perhaps we can go back and resubmit new bills? You know, something that would fall within that billing issues. Some of those buses that we bought, some of the signs that we put out there, some of the things that we as a city, we as the school spent, maybe we can resubmit some of these bills in order to try to get some of those funds back. Is there a possibility that you can kind of reach out to those folks and see if we can kind of resubmit that with the new items on the bills?
That's an excellent suggestion, Counselor, and yes, we certainly can pursue that.
But then, is there a possibility that we can, I know there's audits being done from both the city side and also the school sides, and I'm not against the audits because we got to get to the bottom of this. But the bottom of this, I think, Mr. Clarkson, you could have saved the city a ton of money by just saying what you just said tonight. It came through the salaries, so the salaries were responsible for it. So now I can fix this before we even leave. Let's cut it. Cut this, cut this, cut this, cut that. Then at least we won't have the issues that we have had going forward. You know, if the funds aren't there, sorry people, we can't continue to do the same things. You know? And I hope that we'll come back and figure this stuff out beyond tonight, because tonight is probably not the place to be talking about this, because we're here to make sure that the state doesn't pull the plug on the city and stuff. But I think as soon as January rolls around, most of us are going to be here in this council. And I think we need to kind of sit down and roll up our sleeves and come up with a solution as to how we're going to save the $14 million from that budget. Because if you don't say the how, it doesn't matter. And that's what I keep saying. It does not matter unless you actually say, we need to eliminate this, eliminate this, eliminate that. All you will know is you've overspent, but not that you need to eliminate. So, and I think that's something we need to do. And thank you for being here. Keep up the good work, Mr. Mayor. You know, stay away from COVID. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilor, just one thing. I support your initiative relative to a subcommittee or a joint committee, whatever it's called. And I'm not sure if Legislative Council will determine if that's an ordinance, but I think that's a brilliant idea, and I support that.
No, we have to do that.
Thank you.
We have to do it. Thank you.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Clarkson. I'm going to try to, speed through what I have to say, given the late hour, but I think all of my fellow city councilors brought up some really good points. The one that I really want to piggyback on at this moment was mentioned by Councilor Minichiello, the communication issue. It stinks. It stinks. We do not have, I feel like I'm blind. I feel like the information that you provide is informative, but it's always provided at the last minute. And I just think we talk about partnerships, and I know there's a natural tension between the executive and the legislature. I think that's just how government is set up. But I feel like, you know, we're always receiving information at the last minute. We got to quickly digest it and then try to make an important vote on a very important matter. And just I'm going to just keep it to this school issue, and I could broaden it out to other issues, but on this school issue, just the communication has been poor. Mr. Mayor, you yourself said that you learned on August 8th that we incurred a $14.4 million deficit. Not a single communication was made with this council for 3 weeks. The first any one of us heard about it was emergency session. At the school committee, where we got cops, where we got the mayor's getting arrested, the FBI is raiding City Hall. Didn't have to go like that. 3 weeks. I mean, from August 8th to, what was it, the 26th or something like that? Not one single communication with this council. That's frustrating, Mr. Mayor. That's uncalled for. And just on this issue, Mr. Clarkson, you said in October, you were before us in October, we were talking about the deficit. You said, we're going to have that number in a few days, right? We were discussing, I said, do we know what this number is? And you said, we're finding out, we're going to know in a few days. 2 months later, I mean, just Monday we found out, right before we have to make this vote. I mean, where was, in 2 months, I mean, it went from a few days to 2 months. So that's frustrating. And so I just think the communication issue is one that I want to bring up, and I feel like let's please, let's make like a New Year's resolution that we're going to, instead of all the happy talk about great team, we all work together, let's make that a reality, and let's please share information as soon as possible. And so I think Councilor Rodriguez brings up a few great points, but I want to bring this one up. And Troy, you said that you at this point you're not sure, and maybe technically you're not sure because numbers fluctuate. I don't think there's a single doubt that the 2024 school budget deficit is going to be, 20 fiscal year 24 school budget will be in deficit. If I was a betting man, I'd bet the farm on it. And so I believe we'll be having this conversation again, not too distant in the future. And why do I believe that? Well, okay, you said, well, let's start with the salaries. You said that a large portion of the budget a deficit that we find ourselves in is due to salaries. And it's funny that you mentioned that we're kind of at that point where you're looking at the paper, and let's just say Plouffe School, my daughter attends Plouffe, and you're saying, okay, there's Bob the janitor, Mary the secretary, okay, that's who we have on our list, and you're calling up the principal. Tell me, we got Bob, we got Mary, who do you have over there? Oh yeah, we got Bob, Mary, and Susan, and 3 other people, and you're like, wait a minute, they're not on our list, right? Like, that's where we're at right now, where we got to kind of visually count who's working and bounce that off on who we have on the paper. That's mind-boggling. And then that the statement that I don't want to lose one single job. If we don't lose one single job, then what are we doing this for? Why don't we just have the state come in now? Because maybe they will make the tough political decisions that maybe the administration or this body are unable to make, or maybe the school committee. Honestly, I might have I'd like to hear an argument why we don't let the state come in. If our attitude is not a single job is going to be lost, and in fact, not only that a single job is not going to be lost, but the solution is adding more jobs, right? And I'm not saying that your particular, having an auditor for the school is not a bad idea, but that's adding jobs instead of maybe focusing on where this deficit lies, and that's on salaries as you just stated. We're going to write a check for $10 million tonight, and I wonder, are we paying for the problem instead of buying a solution? Because that's what I want to do. I want to buy a solution, and so we talk about, well, what are those solutions? Now, you brought up some good ones. You talk about combining, right? And I think restructuring. I think that's a good idea. We need a restructure, all right? But in whose purview is that? Is that a policy by the school committee and that it has to be voted on by them? Or is that an executive decision made by you, Mr. Mayor, and you say, we're going to restructure? Or is that something that comes before us and we have to write an ordinance or some type of, some type of order or something coming from this body? Because right now, who fixes this problem? Like, I don't really know. Whose purview is it to implement some of those suggestions that you bring up? And that's the thing. I just think where we talk about the problems, and I think the problems are obvious, and we can talk about how those problems are going to reverberate over the next few years, but it's the idea of a working group. I'm fully on board, and please let me be a part of it. I just don't. What does the city? What does the school committee handle? Like, what's within their purview? What's in your purview as the executive? What's in our purview as the legislative body for the city? I don't know. And I think we need to start having that discussion, because I want to know, how do I fix this problem? Because if the way I fix a problem is writing a check of the taxpayers' money every year, then I don't. That's not a solution I want to be a part of.
We need to have fuller discussions, and that's why these quarterly, monthly, hell, weekly discussions need to happen about, we're good at identifying problems. Are we really good at solving those problems? Let's find out. I want to know, Troy, in your work with what we're trying to save right now through Munis and all of those things that you just brought up about starting from scratch and building a foundation and all of that, what's the type of relationship you're having right now with the school department? Are they on board for this, or are you fighting for every inch?
So first, let me just reiterate some of the things I said earlier, because I think we have instituted very significant controls that did not exist before. So I believe we have focused on the solution and have instituted very strict controls to severely limit the ability for any sort of catastrophic event like what has happened to happen again. So what we're also trying to do is to take the spending on positions that were already in place and quantify those so we can tell you definitively what the trending is for this year. But as I've stated, based on what's in Munis, we are projecting below the appropriation for this year and put in very strict controls on personnel spending so that no position gets filled unless someone from City Hall has done a detailed analysis and says that there is money in the budget to pay that position until the end of the year.
But there's not an extra $14 million to cover these positions that are already in the budget, right? Well, already at least being working right now.
Well, no, of course not. But I'm going to take what Councilor Rodriguez said and certainly agree with a portion of it. But there were significant reductions in staffing at the schools for fiscal year 24.
Okay.
We have been working to try to quantify exactly what those numbers were. To answer your first question, the changes that we've implemented have been received with open arms by some and with skepticism by others, because what we're trying to do is implement profound change. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, a change in the culture. And an organization that large, that is so steeped in tradition of decades, it is very difficult to step in and institute the kind of change that's necessary to put the Brockton Public Schools on firm financial footing. So on that, we can absolutely agree. However, we have taken several steps, not all the steps we need to take, but several steps in the last couple of months to prevent what happened from happening again. And when we have data on exactly what our projections are for spending, we will share those with you and the school committee as soon as they are available.
Okay, but so then a big portion of this debt, or at least $3 million, was from the special education, the out of district. Are we getting more reimbursement from the state for those costs, or have those costs gone up relative to 2023, and has the state matched those increases in cost, if so?
I will ask that question about the comparison of those costs between 2023 and 2024. I don't have that before me, so I don't want to speculate. I do know that the school administration, the consultant from DESE, remember the consultant that was hired works for DESE, and they are providing information on a daily, certainly regular basis on topics like that, and have had, I know, discussions about things like state money that's available to address special education costs. And they are in constant contact to try to address and prevent some of these things from happening again. I don't know exactly where we're at today, but I will get that information for you.
And I would say this is not something, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to those numbers, but this is not something that was new to us. I remember during the budget season with Superintendent Thomas, he was ringing the bell about out-of-state special education costs, saying that we weren't getting reimbursed at the proper levels. He was railing about our transportation costs, that our transportation costs were skyrocketing. So I don't think it's completely, complete news to us that we were running a deficit. So let's talk about transportation. Just in the own numbers, in your own numbers that you provided us a few months ago, I think it was Councilor D'Agostino who mentioned about the transportation budget, and that already in October we're at 300%, I believe, was it 200 to 300% of our transportation budget was already spent.
No.
So
a portion. The way that the non-net school spending is set up in Munis, there was a budget line for purchase of vehicles. And yes, they purchased several vehicles and exceeded that line. But by no means is the overall non-net school spending exceeding at 300%.
You're right, it's the vehicles. I apologize.
But I think that's a good example of what we're trying to accomplish. Because I had heard the same discussions in the community about the fact that transportation was a major factor in the deficit. So we brought the then transportation manager, who's no longer with the district, into my office to talk to him about what their approach was and how they spent. And I said to him, so tell me, what's your budget? And his answer was, we don't have a budget. When we need money, we ask for it and we get it.
Yeah.
So that goes to the heart of the challenge that we have. And so we now have to build a transportation budget from the ground up. At least in that instance, there's a specific amount for net school spending that you provide that essentially is the budget. But the operation should have a line-by-line budget. I believe they have reduced the personnel over last year, and so that their trend is more positive than it was last year. And when we look at that Munis report, it bears that out. But when you ask me, are we going to finish the year in a deficit or not, the reason why I gave a non-definitive answer is because unless and until we have an absolute full understanding of all of the positions and where they're being funded, then I can't definitively ask that question. And when you say that is mind-boggling to you, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't quarrel with that assessment one bit. It's mind-boggling to me, because if you ask me right now, who are we paying for out of the mayor's office budget, I can tell you not only to the penny, but I can tell you based on a report that Evan Lacasse has developed that as of today, we're 49% through the fiscal year, and the spending is at 42%. So I can tell you actually to the penny how much we're either in a surplus or a deficit. That's our goal, to be able to have that level of accuracy and accountability with the school budget. But because our baseline was non-existent, it's taking some time and a lot of work to get us to that point.
And I have no doubt about that, and I appreciate your efforts and a part of your team, all your team's efforts on that, and it's got to get done, and I know you'll continue to do so. It just, I don't, so again, so that looks like an executive function where you can lock that in, and that's how it is from here forward. I'm sure there are other things that require a vote of the school committee or maybe even a vote of this body, and so those are the things that I think we all need to figure out, and maybe that working group between us, some executive representation, some schools committee representation, we can then figure out what problems can you solve on your side, what problems can we solve on our side, and what problems can the mayor's team solve. So I think we need to continue having those discussions. Just quickly on the audits that we've been talking about. I really don't know if I understand the scope of these audits. Mr. Mayor, you're the one, you implemented a city audit. So can we talk scope?
Thank you. I just want to clarify one thing. Perhaps I didn't state it the right way. The state rep asked me relative to union employees, which is our teachers, our paras, our hardworking city and school people. The folks that are across the street are contract, the high earners are contract, they're non-union. So when I'm talking about, I hope to not lose one job, the question was relative to unions, and I want to clarify that because I don't think you stated it that way. In terms of the investigation, as I said at the onset, I am totally out of it. So Attorney Bridges, Solicitor Bridges would be able to opine on all that because it's not the process or procedure for me as the mayor, as the executive, and also as chair of the school committee to be even involved in that. So I can't answer that question, Council, but Megan Bridges could. In terms of what the school audit will be, that is going to be the scope of service will be a forensic audit. It will also be a process audit. But I can't tell you right now, I can't, nor should I, what the investigator's scope of work is, because I wasn't involved in that.
Okay, so if there is a scope of work that you can share with us, could you do that?
It wouldn't be through me again, Council, it would be through the solicitor.
Through the school committee,
Yeah.
okay.
No, the solicitor.
Okay, so then I guess, and Madam Solicitor, if you could just maybe answer this, I'm wondering the scope is, does the scope include, obviously it's going to be, like you said, forensics, right? It's going to say, where did the money go? What was it spent on? The nuts and bolts of the money itself. But I'm wondering, are there going to be interviews with stakeholders, right? Mr. Mayor, do you get interviewed? Does the CFO, does Mr. Aldo, does Mike Thomas? Are there interviews of the stakeholders? And then secondly, at the end of it, are there policy suggestions made?
Madam President, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I just raise either a point of order or a point of inquiry? When you conduct an investigation, and I haven't done this type, but I've done criminal, I'm uncomfortable talking about the scope and who might be interviewed and what we'd be looking for, because there may be people out there who haven't been spoken to yet, and if they know they're going to be spoken to, sometimes they prep for any interview, sometimes evidence that you might uncover would be missing. I have no objection to this if it were in executive session, if that's proper, but I'm really uncomfortable doing it in public. So I'd like to ask for a ruling, if I could, from our legal counsel, from our legislative counsel, if we should do this as a body.
I have no background or knowledge as to the scope, so I'd be completely speculating what the risks were.
The question's on the table. If a solicitor wants to answer, she can. If not, if she says that she doesn't want to provide that information, then that's fine as well.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
My comments will be brief. It is a legitimate investigation. In order to protect the integrity of the investigation and its credibility, its scope should not be discussed in a public forum. I say the word credible and legitimate because it does involve interviews. It will involve findings. It would involve the general components of any legitimate and credible investigation. It is being performed by outside counsel. They are legal folks, and the impetus for the investigation was the announcement of the FY23 deficit. That is the most I can say right now.
What about policy proposals? Were there, at the end, would they suggest any changes or anything that we could better tighten up this ship?
I would say in general, that is one of the many purposes of this complex and serious exercise is how could we have done better? Let's codify it. Let's write it down. Let's make sure that it's able to be disseminated. I don't want to misspeak because I think the gentlemen up here have already alluded to there's two different types of audit, performance audit, really, and a forensics audit. And so in some fashion, at the end of this, in fairly short order, there will be at least some perspective as to what policies could exist.
All right. Thank you, Madam Solicitor. Mr. Mayor, is it your, would you, lost words right now, but promise, I guess, to disseminate that? Would it be your position to disseminate it?
We're paying for an investigation, and all of us should benefit by the investigation. So I would never hide anything. You know me. I'm sorry anybody feels that there's any tension between the executive and council, because I don't, and I'll amend that if people do. But in terms of whatever comes out of that, we owe it to everybody involved to see what the findings are. And I'm anxious to see them. And as I said, I've already informed department heads and anybody that's contacted. The benefits out of this is to speak and speak freely.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So right now, essentially, we're going to write a check for $10 million. The other $9 million, we're expecting to $8 million. To get to the 18 is through the revenue, expected revenues. And I guess you said the alternative was potentially, and I know we don't want this to happen, state come in and then we have to borrow the 18 million. Was there any contemplation on borrowing? Because in the way that instead of writing one check, 18 million, that takes away from fiscal year 2025 and potentially fiscal year 2026, because I believe free cash isn't the next year, it's the following fiscal year, or however these numbers work. But it'll have that 18 million is going to have impact on multiple years. Like, why not 18 years of $1 million to pay this off instead of 1 year of 18 that has such a high impact? Is that an option, or?
I don't believe that it is.
Okay.
But we're in contact multiple times a day with the Department of Revenue, but I don't believe, at least in my experience, let me qualify it by saying that borrowing money to balance a fiscal year budget is not an allowable practice.
Okay. Okay. I did not know that. Thank you for that. And then just lastly, and I know this is kind of in some way a side point, but it is in your email. What's going on with the BRA and lead paint? Why do we have a multi-million-dollar deficit in lead paint? And is this normal?
So, and that question, Councilor, goes to the heart of the varying meanings of the word deficit. And I don't say that to be cute. So, no, the lead program for the Brockton Redevelopment Authority is not in deficit. The federal government awarded, I believe it's $4 million for that program. The program operates. The Brockton Redevelopment Authority, through the city, then files for a reimbursement with the federal government.
Yeah.
When the free cash is calculated, if those reimbursements have not been received, then that is a reduction of free cash. That amount that's out there that needs to be replenished. But that does not mean, and I need to state this emphatically, that those programs have been overspent or are in a deficit.
We just haven't received the grant reimbursement yet for what we...
It's the same.
We did yesterday.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, it was reconciled yesterday, thanks to Karen Prevel. 1.2 million of the lead grant came in, and that was at 229 on Tuesday, the 19th of December.
Okay, and so this is normal operating procedure with the lead paint, only because it's never come up before. So it sometimes comes this late in the year.
So what we would like to see is an operation where those reimbursements are filed in a timely manner and they don't cause a reduction in free cash. So is there room for improvement there? Most certainly. But is that an extraordinary occurrence in this or any other community? No.
So the issue was we filed late for the reimbursements?
Correct. Yeah, well, and there are, I think, other operational issues with the Brockton Redevelopment Authority and some of the turnover that they have that we can talk about. Maybe we have a resolve to talk just about the BRA and how that can be improved.
I think we should.
But I think it's important to draw a very clear distinction between a reduction of free cash for something like that and the over expenditure of an appropriation that you're being asked to address tonight.
So does that 1.2, does that plug any holes or no? That we received this money yesterday, does that plug any of these holes?
It's not going to change this free cash calculation because, again, it's a snapshot in time. But certainly, next year when we do this calculation, we would hope and expect that there will be no reductions from the Brockton Redevelopment Authority grant programs.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, again, tough business tonight. I just think we all need to work, just on the communication, I just think we need to work harder on that, and I appreciate you guys, all your efforts, your team. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's been a long one. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilor.
You're welcome. Councilor Azak.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, and I'm going to try not to repeat everything that was said here tonight because a lot was said. First of all, this is a very important meeting. That's why we're all here. I know it was brought up a few times that some of the school committee members weren't here, but I believe a couple of them that I know of had signed up this evening to participate in a great program for Brockton students over at the district court for mock trial. Some of the students were doing mock trial over with an actual judge, and so I had to cancel, but I know my sister was on the list also, so maybe that's why she's not here. But we talk about community.
Actually, your sister had an injured back. Let me clarify that. So she wasn't going to be able to make it. She had an injured back. She told me last night.
I know she had signed up, so I don't know if she had canceled. But that's I know I canceled for them, but that's a program that with Brockton students that's really important. So we talk about communication. We talk about it all the time, but I feel like we don't work together because I can speak for myself. I don't know about the other councilors, but I find that I'm the last to find out about a lot of stuff. I know Councilor Farwell said he found out about the deficit August 8th. I didn't find out till you announced it, till I saw our mayor on the news and, with social media. So I didn't find out about a lot of stuff. And I feel like the city council plays a huge role in fixing some of the problems the city finds itself in, yet I feel we're the last ones to find out about things, and most of the time it's rushed, like this meeting, a few days before a major holiday, and I wish we had known before. And I know, Mr. Clarkson said he just found out on Friday. I'm not going insinuate anything, but there's no way the DOR just left us a few days before Christmas to make this major decision before the end of the month. I wish we had known before. I wish we could have dealt with things better. I think we could have communicated better, but I really feel we need to practice the communication where the city council is involved, because once again, I feel we're always the last to find out. So whatever we need to do, I know we had a conversation yesterday, Mayor. You called us on Monday when I didn't find out about the meeting until Monday when I received the packet. So
I flew back Sunday night, Shirley, so I wasn't.
I'm sorry. I know,
flew back
and I understand that, but that's and like I said, I think we just have to try to work better on communicating, because that's really key with getting things done. So obviously it's disheartening. We're in this position and none of us want to be here, but I remember during the budget hearings, I asked at the time, Mr. Petronio, I asked him why this year's school budget went from usually a 3-ring binder to a little pamphlet, and it had none of the salaries in there, none of the it didn't have any of the employees in there. And I remember I think he said, well, if you want the information, we can get it to you. I feel, now when I think back, I hope that didn't play a role in all this whole deficit, because for years, this was my 10th budget, and we've always gotten a really good-sized budget from the school department with details of all the employees. So I kept wanting to go back, look at the meetings to see but I remember asking the question of what happened to the school budget. Why was it so thin this year? So we have a problem. My colleagues have mentioned it. I see that, we have a deficit, but I don't see that we're trying to fix it. Whether it's salaries, whether it's buses, a few months ago, we were looking to pay how many million to park the buses over on the south side of the city? Thank God we didn't approve that. Where would we be now? So I think if we had an idea of this deficit, yet we continued to the decision didn't go through, we didn't vote on it, but yet proposals were still being made for us to find ourselves we could have been in a deeper deficit. So I thank God that didn't pass. But I think we have to work together on finding solutions, whether it's salaries, whether it's the busing, whatever it may be. We have to work on finding solutions, otherwise we're going to be in the same spot next year and the year after. So, and I'm not a finance expert, but it's common sense. If we're not fixing the problem, we're just constantly trying to, find the money to cover these expenses. It's never going to end. And that brings me, I know we spoke about the CARES Act, but Mr. Clarkson, I remember you being in front of us, and any expenses from the city side from the CARES Act had to get approval. So there was a list of things that would get approved. So how did the school side spend things that were not reimbursable from the CARES Act when there were only certain things that we knew when we received the funding from the CARES, that we were getting the funding, that they could be only spent for certain things? Am I wrong? I remember you specifically telling us what the funds could be used for. So how did they spend it, but yet we couldn't get reimbursed for it?
I think the restrictions on the funding of which you speak, Councillor, were placed by this body on the receipt of the American Rescue Plan funds, the ARPA funds.
Okay.
But there was no such restriction on the CARES Act and the pandemic funding. But I think the point that you make speaks to the challenge and part of the problem that really underlies the comments by all the councillors tonight, and that is the financial independence of the school system that needs to be reined in, and we need a mechanism for the city to exercise greater oversight of the schools. Having worked in several places in Massachusetts, that independence is not uncommon. And in fact, I would say generically, it's a result of the Ed Reform Act of 30 years ago that gave schools greater independence. But there are tools available to increase a city's oversight, and I think those are discussions that we should have so that the ability for the city to have that closer oversight over routine spending exists. We have stepped in based on the wording of Chapter 324 and the belief that that allows my position specifically to exercise some oversight, but I do believe that greater oversight, operational oversight, is possible and should be considered.
Okay. So lastly, and the reason we're all here this evening is because we all knew the result of what the result needed to be for this meeting. Nobody wants the city to go into receivership. No, I mean, just hearing that, I think, makes us all, that's nothing that we want to hear. That's why we take this very seriously. But it's being thrown around very lightly. What does it mean for the city to go into receivership? Literally, what does it, I mean, I know what it means, but what would happen? Because I believe when this happened back in the 90s, that is why your position was created, Mr. CFO, and that's, so what would it mean if, say, we don't vote on this evening and the city goes into receivership?
Well, I'm by no means an expert on that, but...
But I don't know, maybe our solicitor, I don't know, who would tell us? What does that mean?
Well, I can answer the question, but I
sure.
just want to make it clear that I have not participated or worked in a community where this has occurred, but I do have general knowledge about the process. The Commonwealth has the authority to assume oversight, direct oversight of just the school department through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They also have the ability to step in, as they did here 30 years ago, if the city is unable to balance its budget. And so when I used that word in an email, what I meant was we could be subject to either or both of those eventualities, that our inability to balance the budget and set a tax rate could result in a takeover by the Commonwealth of the Brockton Public Schools, or a takeover of the city of Brockton. And what that meant 30 years ago was the institution of a finance control board, Chapter 324 of the Acts of 1990, that created my position, instituted a finance control board that actually became the financial decision-making body for the city. And so those who were here would have a better perspective, but practically what I believe that means is a significant reduction in the authority of the city council to appropriate and exercise oversight, and that authority then gets vested in the finance control board. I can't tell you with certainty that that would be an outcome of a no vote tonight, but I believe it is a distinct possibility.
Thank you, and I think that I just wanted it to be clarified what that meant. So that would also mean that somebody would come in and make decisions, so what would happen to your position? Like, what would happen to...
I don't know.
But as far as the city council, we also wouldn't operate as a body as we do now. That would definitely, you said that there would be a board, and who would make up that board?
So, again, I think that would depend on whether or not there was a special act created, or whether or not there have been finance control boards in other cities where there's a representative, and I'm just giving an example, so I'm not saying this is what would happen here, but a representative of the Department of Revenue, and then there are other appointees. I'm not an expert on the roles of the city council, but you certainly have roles and responsibilities outside of finance that I would think would not be impacted by that, right? The passage of ordinances for zoning and other general municipal purposes. But certainly the practice in communities where a finance control board exists severely limits the authority of the executive branch to exercise any financial oversight.
Thank you. And usually how long would that last, until they got everything, in order, or?
So it's funny you should ask, because I had a conversation with the DESI consultant from Open Architects, who actually worked in Springfield when that occurred 10 or so years ago, and that finance control board stayed in place for 5 years.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, once again, that's not the direction that I don't think any of us want to go in, but I just wanted to be clear that the seriousness of it, and where, I think people at home need to know that that's not our goal. Our goal is to make, we have the funds, we take your expertise and telling us that, we can do this, and that's what we're here for, to support this. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Councilor Tavares.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for being here today.
Actually, my question, like, all my colleagues already asked, I don't want to repeat the same thing. I don't think I'm going to be saying that about the communication. I've been complaining that for a long time. We kind of feel like, we're not part of it. As a city councilor, new city councilor, I feel little much welcome and appreciated between us. We have such a great relationship, especially for me, new councilor. I learned a lot from my colleagues, and then we feel like we are a team. We feel we are strong. But in terms with the relation with the, mayor's side, literally, we feel very poor communication. I've been said that multiple times. Has whatever happened, we are last to know things. But when it comes to emergency, look like we are first to know what to worry and fix the problem right away. I feel communication is very important because when we have a communication is the key. If we have more communication, probably we can do better work. We can fix the problem and find the solution together. And then I hope 24, we literally work better between the councilors and mayor side, the way we can provide a better service for the taxpayer. I know we are human, we all do error, but if we work together, we can collaborate together, we can find solution together, we can fix the problem. Sometimes, we just get the short notice quickly, and with the big numbers, we need to kind of work and fix it and approve. But in the day, sometimes, we need literally to sit down to study it before we sign, we approve things. Because when the taxpayer asks us, why you signing 10 million? Sometimes we don't have the answer. That looks so bad to us. We need to study it, to understand it, to comprehend it. When they ask us question out here, we need to have the answer. And in the meantime, with the deficit, I know, Mr. Troy, you already explained it about the transportation, you already explained it, the details. But we just need to literally, with the more definition, breakdown, and what. For example, we spend the $10,000 water, 1 million, this, that, with a little more definition. In that case, when the taxpayer asked us question, what happened, we have a better answer to answer the many time. Especially with those deficits, 14 million, myself, sometimes I look very, when the taxpayer asked me the question, especially for my word, we have a lot of problem with the language, understand stuff. I don't have no answer. I feel like, I don't know exactly what I look like confused. Probably look like, why are you there for? That doesn't look good to us. Doesn't look we're doing a great job, because when they asked us the question, we don't have the answer. Look like we're just here because we're here. If we work together and we provide more communication, we study together, then when they ask the question, we have the answer. That look like we do better job. Especially, I just visited some word, actually. The resident was like, I talked to Councilor Mendes. I asked about 14 million. Councilor Mendes did not answer the question. And then they get upset because Councilor Mendes did not answer the question, because they said, well, we still studied to get the answer, then we're going to bring it back. But they couldn't understand the studying what. And I was like, well, I have the same answer because we're still waiting for the answer. We still not have no answer. And then again, it was very sad when we are the last to know, like myself, I know through the Facebook. And then I start calling my colleague to kind of find out what's going on. And that's something I'm a little expected for us to have a better way to communicate it, especially with the budget. We need to have a more definition, more transparency. Most of us, we're not expert in accounting. I'm not going to be expected this time we spend 400 for others, because when you say other, we don't know what the other meaning. I'm not expected, with the detailed definition instead of the other. That's all I have for tonight, and then I wish, good luck, and for us to have a better relationship to 24. And we here, like, we're here to serve the taxpayer. Anytime we can, if it's a problem, you can call us the way. I believe everybody is not gonna, get upset. We're all here to fix the problem, to solve the problem for taxpayer and to do better job. And that's all I can say. And I wish you all good luck.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
All set?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Texera.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Clark and Mr. Mayor, to be here. Again, I'll echo a little bit on communication because everybody's talking about communication. It's a lack of communication with this council and the mayor's office. And my question goes to Mr. Clark. You said about 14.4 million. It's most of the employees, right? Do we have a number of employees that covers that 14.4 million?
We could certainly get that detailed information. It's similar to what Councilor Tavares just asked for, some more definition on what makes that up. I can absolutely get that for you.
And I want to echo a little bit on what Councilor Rodriguez about the 14.4 million. We haven't laid off anyone, have we?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. I think the point that the Councilor Rodriguez was making was that he would have liked to have seen more reductions in the central office staff rather than reductions in teacher positions. There were significant reductions in the staffing levels from fiscal year 23 to 24. But I agree that it's very important to look at all aspects of the budget, including the administrative side, to see if there are opportunities to either reduce staffing or, as I mentioned earlier, to combine departments so that city and schools, you can have a combined human resource department or a combined finance department or a combined facilities department. Because at the end of the day, school facilities are city facilities, right? So I think there are opportunities for us moving forward to even further reduce costs by combining our efforts.
Okay. And going back to transportation, we own our own bus. Does it make sense to invest all that money into the bus? Are we saving money on the transportation?
I believe still it was a sound decision to do that because the escalation of the costs for the contract was escalating at a rate such that it made sense to acquire them and own them. School buses generally, those services are procured through a bid process, but I think just what we see generally in Massachusetts is that there's not a lot of competition when those bids are put out, and so that results in a significant escalation in costs. And so what the school department showed us when they were advocating for operating our own transportation department was that those costs were escalating at an annual amount that and this was when inflation was pretty low, that far outstripped inflation, and so that it made sense to look, and we had the opportunity with some of the money that was available because of COVID, and we had transportation money that could be allocated for that purpose to bring that in-house. We are looking at the transportation operation with the same vigor that we're looking at the other operations to ensure that those costs are within the amount that's appropriated.
Okay. And my question, because we got to lease the school department, they lease a warehouse at the mall for $435,000 yearly. I thought that was supposed to become before the city council and never reached the city council, and the lease was up for $435,000 approximately. Yearly. Did anybody inform us, especially the city council? I don't think none of us knows about this warehouse at the Westgate Mall that was leased for $435,000. I'm just put that number there. It's 435,000. Maybe it's a little bit more, but we were not informed because I thought they were supposed to come before the city council to get approved.
Council, I concur with you. The city solicitor has been spending a lot of time on leases on the school side. I can also tell you that some work of services were being done, and I have told them not to pay for the services because contracts are not signed. And I am not going to, first of all, it's unlawful, but it's the risk on the contractor if they're doing services without a valid contract. So we're looking at contracts. We had a meeting in my office, and a solicitor was there. Peter Mello, who is an attorney on behalf of the school sides, Dr. Cobbs. We're asking for a complete itemization of all those leases you're talking about and all the contracts, because quite honestly, I concur with you as someone that sat up there. I believe the process was to get council approval.
Yeah, because it's a lot of money, 18 million. It's a lot of money. Again, me personal, I don't want to see my city be handled to DOR. We'll do anything that we have to do. On my side, I'll support the 18 million, but we need to do a better job going forward, especially be more transparent. Communication is the key, and we need to run this city like it's our business, because when we care about the city, and we should run it like a business. Let's watch all the pennies, where it goes, how it goes, and because we got to pay for it. If I'm not paying for it, my kids, my grandkids will be paying for it. So somebody will be paying for it. There's nothing for free. Even the air that we breathe is not for free, but we need to do a better job, and the communication is the key, because it has to be a better communication. Thank you.
So I hear you all. Some of you I talk on a regular basis, some I very rarely talk. I will make a pledge that we will continue, I will continue to do a better job. But I also would just humbly ask, you all have my private cell phone as well, but we are in this together. So I want to thank all of you that have said that. I hear you. I will continue to work with you and work for you. And the two new councils that are coming in, Jean and also Phil, the same goes to them as well. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. So it's my turn now. Hardest part of this job is waiting for my turn at the end. So our resident property owners work hard for funds to pay their property taxes, okay? And there is no more important line item in our budget than what we pay to educate our children and socialize our children. And I think in my 6 years on this council, in all of its forms, with people coming and going, to some extent, we have made it clear that the council supports the budgets put in front of us to educate our children, all right, and to address the needs that they have. And so it is a grave disappointment to be sitting here tonight, and this has been a very good discussion, but also a very troubling discussion. I read Chapter 324. I've read it often. I read it again today. It has served us well. It does set out some obligations in it. And so I'm wondering why the auditing department or the finance department didn't catch the overspending by the public schools.
I think it's a very legitimate question, and that's a question that's been posed to me several times over the last few months. What I can tell you is that I've worked here in Brockton for 3 mayors. 2 of them are here in this room. The exercise of oversight of the school department, although it most certainly is in Chapter 324, has not been a construct under which I've worked. Is that an area where perhaps we should have been exercising that oversight? I think that is absolutely a fair assessment, but it is not something that, since I've been here, that has been a part of my job. The schools, in my experience, operate independently financially, So we are moving forward and interpreting that language to mean that I can and should exercise that oversight. And I think having exercised that oversight for the last several months has produced some very positive results, and we will continue to do that. As I've stated a few times tonight, I think that in addition to the language of Chapter 324, there are more steps that can, and I would suggest should be taken to solidify the city's ability to exercise greater oversight of the schools.
Okay. And I've had calls from residents, and several of the calls centered around we discussed it briefly tonight, there are several people from the top of the public schools administration who are on leave for various reasons. How much longer do you estimate they will be on leave, and what kind of information are you looking for to make a further decision on that?
So, I mean, this is for more, you may not know this, but it's for more educational purposes. The two individuals that are on administrative leave don't report to the school committee, they report to the superintendent. So when Dr. Cobbs became the acting superintendent, he placed him on administrative leave. The former superintendent, or I guess he's still superintendent, Mike Thomas, is on medical leave. That's all I can say. It's personnel, it's HR. But again, 2 administrative, 1 medical.
And huge expenses because we're paying their full salaries. And so I promised that I would carry that forward. Thank you. We are watching. Okay? Let's see. I've had several school committee people say, well, I asked for financial information from the administration, but I never got it. Okay? I'm wondering if it's possible to send the school committee members for training. Mass Municipal must hold something like that, because I've never let no in this position. I've never taken no for an answer and kept asking questions and been a real nag when I needed to know something. And I've been successful every time. So, is it possible to send them for training?
So I don't have the authority to force any elected official for training. As mayor, I'm the CEO of the city of Brockton, right? As chair of the school committee, I'm number 8 out of 7 elected officials. I can ask, humbly ask. Last night we had a school committee meeting. We passed a policy last night for mandatory online training for DEI purposes. I will welcome that, and I will work with you, Madam President, to get some more detailed information. Listen, I think training is good for everybody. You support my budget every year when I put training in for department heads, so I'm not opposed to that. As a member of the school committee, I would do that. I just can't sit here in good faith and tell you, yes, they can, because I don't have that within my purview to make them do training, but I can humbly suggest it.
Point of information, they do, school committee members go every year. I know they just had it a few weeks ago down
The mask, yes.
They go to mask. I know my sister does a lot of the training every year. She's been doing it since she's been elected. Now, it's not mandatory because not all members go, but some do, and I know she does.
Like last night, we had Attorney Paige Tobin come in to give us a really good legal summary relative to discipline and what can happen now as a result of some legislative changes in terms of suspensions and stuff like that. So there are training capabilities. MASC is an association. It's kind of like MMA. It is an association for school committee. So I can get a listing of the types that they offer, but as the council said, it's not mandatory, but it is an option. But I'll have further discussions with you on what you're thinking about as well.
Thank you. And I'm also wondering about, so today we're talking about 18 million in a deficit for FY23. But on information and belief, FY22 had a deficit of over 10 million. I've never seen anything in writing about it, and yet I understand that was plugged by rearranging some money. So we don't have to go down that path tonight. I know that the two of you are aware of it, but my question is, if we knew that there was a deficit of 10 million, well, I don't know why the city council didn't find out, but if you knew about 10 million in the prior fiscal year, why weren't we looking for something? Why weren't we more aware?
So this, again, speaks to the independence of the school district and their ability to manage and oversee their operation. The school department did not make any request to the city to address any deficits they may have had in fiscal year 22 or before. What I believe to be the case was that there was significant pandemic-related federal funding that allowed them to address some of those issues that they had, and it didn't require any intervention from the city. I'm going to answer that question in part by quoting Councilor Minichiello and asserting to you that the current system of how the schools are funded and operate and are overseen is broken. And so we need a better system so that there is greater oversight by and collaboration with the city to understand, but also to have more control over how the funds are spent on a daily basis.
I've heard stories of excessive spending, buying things they don't need and putting it into storage for a number of years now. My final question is about the leased space that we spoke about. Councilor Texera brought it up. Doesn't that involve procurement? Shouldn't procurement procedures have been followed to lease space?
The simple answer to that question is yes, of course.
And it wasn't.
So I think what the mayor spoke about and what Councilor Texera spoke about was that there is a belief by the city that a lease should rightfully come before the city council, and it did not. So that, as he mentioned, the solicitor is working closely on those issues, and we're doing the best we can to try to fix any problems that exist.
I think the other thing that's important, so we have a very good procurement officer here, Mike Morris, right? He's been here since Mayor Jack Units. He's, I think, 28 years, he told me today at the department. The guy's phenomenal. School side had a procurement person that retired, and that position was never filled. And so, as it's been stated by many of you, and I concur, the system's broken. And so, you know, we, on the city side, have to come up with the corrective, constructive methods to create a plug to that fracture. And so, you know, working with Mike Morris, figuring out why that person wasn't hired, and that's all going to come out in investigations and audits and all that stuff, and I think that's what the healthy component is. But these are all legitimate questions, and, you know, I have the same questions you have on a lot of these things, so we will get to the bottom of it. We won't do so tonight, though.
It is a most unfortunate situation because not only do we have this financial monster, great word for it, but we also have issues with curriculum and with our children being educated and their behavior. And it just breaks my heart that we're in this mess. And you're both tasked with helping us to get out of it. There's no more important work that you could be doing right now. We will help you all that we can. As Councilor Thompson posited, what is our role? We will play a role. We will assist you to the extent we can. I guess tonight our role is to approve the requested funding. I'm going to ask Councilor Farwell, I sponsored this, I'm going to ask Councilor Farwell to close this.
All right, I'll wrap up quickly. Councilor Thompson, many years ago, the city accepted Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 37M. That allows for the consolidation of municipal functions. The only thing we're lacking is a vote, an affirmative vote of the school committee. So if they vote to accept 37M, we can merge finance, we can merge public property, we can merge a whole human resources, we can merge a whole host of commonly used functions in the municipality, and I think save hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that should be done. That should go before the school committee. Just a correction to my friend, Councilor Azak. I didn't know about the deficit on August 8th. The mayor and the chief financial officer, in their press release, said that they found out about it on August 8th, and it just happened to be my birthday. That's why that date stuck with me. To both of you, we're people before we're public officials. I know this has taken a lot out of you both personally. I mean, I was up at 2 o'clock this morning thinking about this meeting, so I just want you to know that there's a personal aspect to it. And that washes over to our hundreds and hundreds of staff members and our thousands of students. I mean, we've talked a lot of facts and figures tonight, but Councilor Mendez is quite right. What we're really talking about is people of different age groups. Mr. Mayor, I believe the school committee would have the authority to take an affirmative vote to terminate people who are on paid leave for cause. They would certainly want to consult with their legal counsel, but based on my experience, the school committee supervises and hires the superintendent. They could take that vote, and I think there's a festering sense of frustration in the community that people are sitting home, one of whom was collecting over 200 grand, which is not good. And finally, to my friend Councilor Rodriguez, you're absolutely right. Unless we see transformative leadership from the school committee by next July 1st, it would be, to me, unconscionable to send kids to school under the same situation now that exists on September 1st or whatever the date is. Personally, folks, I would not have a problem having DESE come in for a couple of years and take over oversight of the Brockton Public Schools. I had a very positive experience with the Financial Control Board. They came in the year before I was elected mayor. They worked with us. They really didn't interfere. They were a check and balance to make sure that we were balancing our expenditures with our revenues. But I do not want to send kids to school and staff members to school next September under the same circumstances, and if it means filing an order and asking this council to consider having DESE come in, I could live with that. I almost think we owe it to people. So this has really been a great discussion, and why I think this is an excellent council. And I guess I'm going to move to adopt the order as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to approve. A roll call vote, Madam Clerk?
Azak?
Yes.
D'Agostino?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Minicello?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Tavares?
Yes.
Texera?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
11 in the affirmative.
I move reconsideration in the hope it does not prevail.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion for reconsideration in the hope that it fails, and it's been properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? It fails. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, councilors. And this will be my last time appearing before you in this session. I want to thank Councilor at Large. I want to thank Councilor for your service for the city, and continue to do what you do so great on Beacon Hill. And think about being a Board of Commission. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned.